Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to this virtual conference today. We've already got 50 people arriving. Give it a few more minutes. Hello, hello to everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Great. Welcome. Welcome to the Lone Worker Safety Live. And as we like to say, it's virtually a conference. And indeed, we hope it will be a conference, online conference today. So thanks for joining us. I can see we've got more people arriving this afternoon. Welcome. Welcome to everybody. We've got people registering today coming from a whole variety of businesses and organizations. We've got people from housing, charities, manufacturing, railways, utilities, councils, universities, retail, the NHS, the HSE is with us, agriculture. And so we're really happy to have all of you joining us today in what we hope will be a really interesting and informative day. So welcome. Oh, I see some people we know. Hello, Christine. Hello. Hi to Sarah W. Those folks from BSIA. Hello, everybody. Hello from our local council in Warwickshire. Welcome. Welcome. Let me introduce myself. My name is Kristen Gasser, and I work with Worthwhile Training, which organizes Lone Worker Safety Live. It's the only event in the UK to focus on the safety, security, and well-being of lone workers. And basically, I'm going to be your MC for the day. I'm going to keep all the balls in the air and keep all of us on track, hopefully. We've got a really good selection of speakers today, all coming with unique perspectives to help us consider the many ways that COVID-19 has impacted on lone working, not only today, but how it might continue to do so in the future. So, it's clear the impact of this pandemic on the way we work has been massive for organizations, but also for people. And so today offers you a range of perspectives and an opportunity to ask your questions of our experts. So hopefully the speakers are settling in. I hope you're settling in. Let us know if you have any troubles down there in the Q&A box, and we have our colleague Lou on the line who can maybe help you. I see more people. Hello, hello. Welcome for joining us. Okay. Well, let's get started. Let's ease our way into this show. We've got 3 hours today. And basically, we were planning a year ago to be face-to-face in one room. This is where we should have been today on that photo, where all of us were together. And I guess we really don't need to explain why we're not there. But with any luck, the second photo on the right is where we'll be next year, on the 12th of October, 2021. This, for those who don't recognize it, is our new venue, Lord's Cricket Ground. It's very exciting. And besides great speakers and our wonderful exhibitors and your chance to network with your peers, it will also provide you with a special Lord's cream tea. And if you choose, you can take a tour of the cricket grounds at the end of the day. So it's something for everybody. You can register on our website, loneworkersafetylive.com. And please don't forget, if you want to join us for this real thing next year and the cream tea, you can get a 10% discount off your delegate rate by registering. So we really hope to see you there next year in person live. But for right now, we're here online. And today we're really excited to offer up a mini version of Lone Worker Safety Live. Compact, but hopefully impactful. Here's the timetable for the afternoon. Those of you who are IT savvy, you can take a screenshot of it to remind you of who's on when. It means you can nip off for a cup of tea or a comfort break, or to let the dog out if you need to, whatever you want, and then make sure that you're back on time to catch the next one. You can see we've got a great lineup of speakers. We begin with Worthwhile Training's own Nicole Vasquez, who'll give you an overview of how lone working has been affected by this new norm. And we're really happy to have the health and safety exec on board to tell us about their new guidance for lone working. And Jane Crow from the co-op will then provide us a case study on how that organization has addressed lone working in light of COVID. And We'll find out from the human applications team some practical guidance from the health and safety world, what it looks like from their perspective. And then we have Layla Okai, who will focus us on the mental health and well-being of lone workers. You know, it's always important, that component to the job, their health and well-being, but it's even more so critical these days. And finally, we'll end with a panel discussion around technology, how it's evolving while continuing its key role to support lone workers and keep them safe. So it's a really full afternoon. It is 3 hours. So feel free, if you need to drop in and out, you're welcome to. And a little bit about our virtual world here. I imagine many of you feel you already have an advanced degree in Zoom University, as I call it. But for those who haven't participated in a Zoom webinar, which is basically what this is, here are a few tips to help you find your way around the screen. If you're new to Zoom, it's intuitive, basically. Our conference is essentially a webinar. So as participants, you won't be seen and you can't be heard. So, you know, don't worry about the kettle boiling, which is good. But you do have some control over what you see. So for instance, if you look in the top right-hand corner, you have the option to toggle between a gallery view, see everybody, and a speaker view. You can also choose whether you want to focus on the PowerPoint slides as a central large picture, or whether you want to focus on the person speaking. So you can click on the upper right side of the images to select your view. And you can also pin the video of the speaker you wish to see by hovering over their image and clicking the 3 dots and selecting the pin video. So there's lots of options on how you choose to view the content. And now across the bottom, there's the control bar. Please, can I ask that you use the Q&A box that's down there to send us questions or comments rather than the chat box. It just puts them all in the same place for us so that we can look at them easily. And please, today is going to be as interactive as we can make it while not being in the same room. We want you to ask questions. For instance, you may already have a question for the technology panel, for instance, that's coming later. So you can put that in there. Please, you can add the person's name that you want to ask a question to if you want to focus it. But feel free to ask the questions. There is a box you can tick that makes them anonymous so that we don't know who they come from if you prefer. And we'll try to answer as many of your questions live, or we'll message you back. There'll be several polls today, which will pop up on your screen. Select your answers and submit it, and Zoom will tabulate them for us and we'll let you know the results. And just so you know, those also are anonymous, so we'd really like to know what you think. And let's see, we're recording this conference today, and it will be on our YouTube channel with the link sent to you after today. So you'll have the opportunity to listen to it again or point others to it after today. But it's never as good as it is live. So please, if you can, stick with us today. Be great. And finally, if you're social media savvy, you can tweet or comment on LinkedIn using the hashtag LWSL 2020. So please do give us a tweet. Okay, I think we're basically ready to start to get into the meat of it. I hope so. As I said, our colleague Louise is on the line to help with any technical issues. You can message her in the Q&A section with any techie issues, but also remember, if you want to ask a question, you can focus it on who it should go to, especially if a question, for instance, for the panel at the end. Send them in throughout the day and we'll be able to ask them when we get to it. Okay, I hope you're with us. I hope you're ready to get started. Let's start with our first poll. See what you think. What does our audience think today? How has lone working changed your business since COVID? You can choose any of these. Do you do far more of lone working? Are the activities you do now with lone workers different than before? Are you working mainly from home? Do you feel there's new risks involved now? Have you had to find different control measures? Are you still seeking, how do I control the risks with more people doing different things alone than they were before? Or do you do less of it? Or do you find that actually in my organization, actually it hasn't been much change at all? So we'll give you a few more seconds to vote. Coming in. Interesting. Multiple choice. We've almost got, try and make up your minds. it's interesting to think. Our first speaker, Nicole Vasquez, is going to be talking about this. How has the environment for lone working changed in light of COVID? And do you think some of these changes are for good, or is it just in the meantime? Is it the new norm? What does the new norm look like? Has everybody voted? Shall we see the results? There they are. Interesting. 58% of you said we're now working mainly from home. That's over half. I wonder, and that probably has been a big change. Almost half say we do a lot more of it. A third of you say the activities are different now. A third say basically there's new risks and we have to find different control measures. A minority of you, we do less of it and there's been no change. So there's definitely been a lot of change, a lot of change. So I think that's one of the good reasons why this is the topic for the conference today, lone working and COVID. And to get at that, let me introduce our first speaker. Now, Nicole Vasquez from Worthwhile Training. She is the director of Worthwhile. Worthwhile's hosted the Lone Worker Safety Live conference for about 3 years, but we've been helping organizations manage risks for their staff for over 25 years across all sectors, retail, rail, housing, government departments in the UK and beyond. And today, Nicole is considering how has COVID changed lone working? Has it changed the activities lone workers do, the types of risks faced, businesses' approach to lone working? Nicole, over to you.
Hi, Kristen, and hi, everybody. I was just excited actually because I was looking at this and saying we've got about 125 people who have joined us so far today. I know we had about 250 people registered almost, so that means there's probably a lot of people either join us for bits of the day. And that's kind of how we've put the whole session together this afternoon. We know 3 hours is a long time to be sat in front of a screen, so feel free to kind of pop in and pop out as you want to and take a break when you need to. There will be little kind of natural breaks as the afternoon goes on there as well. So hopefully that those numbers will stay with us there or thereabouts, or be able to view it as Kristen said afterwards. So that's great. But thank you, Kristen. Thank you for that. So look, lone working. Kristen and I have worked together for a long time now, and I certainly have kind of been working with lone workers for almost 25 years. And kind of it has changed, I think, personally, over the last few months. I'm going to be really scared when it gets to that point when we go over the last year, because I don't think this is going away anytime soon, is it? But lone working has changed because the way that people work, I think, has changed over the last few months. And certainly the way that we're dressed when we go out lone working has changed. If you look at the photographs on the screen, there's a lot of our guys there wearing masks or face coverings, and a lot of people working from home, as you said in your polling. But I would also say that I actually don't think that lone working by definition has fundamentally changed. If you think of the definition of a lone worker, that is no different now than it was pre-COVID. And the HSE define an individual working without close or direct supervision as a lone worker. And I think that's probably why we've got far more people doing it now. I mean, in the poll, it said 40% people of you said that you do far more of it now than you did previously. So I think that although the actual definition hasn't changed, perhaps the situations that people are lone working in has, and the need for lone working has as well. I don't know about you, but I can kind of remember the early days of COVID where I was actually thinking, this is quite nice working at home in the quiet and not having nobody else around. But that kind of wears a bit thin after a while, doesn't it? And I think people kind of get a little bit stressed by it. The isolation is an impact. So we do have to kind of look at where people are lone working. Now, the HSE in their latest guidance, which came out in March, identify 3 different areas. They say, look, there's people who are fixed base. So that could be you're in a retail environment, maybe a warehouse, hospitality, something of that nature, maybe just an office. But it's a fixed base that is controlled by the organisation. And then you have remote lone workers, and these have been given all sorts of names over the years, location independent workers or flexible workers or, whatever it might be. But this idea that actually they are not at your base and they're not working from home, but they're actually going out and about into the community. Now, obviously, for obvious reasons, a lot of that stopped during the main kind of lockdown, but there are now a lot of people, and we've got clients that are having employees now going back out and about into the into community and having to loan work remotely. But of course, then there's also a massive amount of people who are working mainly from home, and I think that is definitely going to be the way to go. You know, I know friends and family members who've just said, I don't have an office anymore. My business is actually closed, our offices down. So even when COVID's over, we are not going to return to that. This is definitely going to be something that is on the agenda for quite some time for a lot of people. So if we start with that premise that actually loan working by definition hasn't fundamentally changed, why are we doing this conference this afternoon? Well, I think that although the definition hasn't changed, what may have changed are quite a few things. The first thing is that this was something that perhaps we didn't plan for. You know, it was kind of thrust upon us back in March, wasn't it? And nobody really thought, oh, I know, let's get rid of our offices and send everybody home. Or you know, let's not allow two people to travel in a car together. Let's just have one person. There was no kind of planning for it. And so it's something that's been thrust upon us, as I say. And I think it also means that the frequency of loan working for a lot of people has increased. I was often a lone worker before this anyway, working at home or going out and about and meeting clients, which meant I travelled on my own. But I also spent days with colleagues like Kristen and Adi and the rest of the team. But the frequency of that has now changed, and I'm now much more predominantly a lone worker, as a lot of people are finding themselves in that situation. The activities and situations that people do have changed. There may be jobs that were never done as a lone worker previously, that now, for economic reasons or because of COVID regulation reasons, now have to be done on their own. And that has an impact on the type and level of risk, and I'll talk about that in a minute or two. But the type and level of risk has changed, and I think so has the risk management and the available controls to people, the way in which we control things, not just risk management, but management on its own. If I'm a manager of lone workers and I'm working from home, it might be much harder for me to be able to keep an eye on where my people are during the day. I don't know whether they've gone out and about. I don't know what they're doing in the same way that I might have done if they'd have been in the office and then disappeared from there. I would see them go, I would see them come back. There's a lot more kind of accountability in the old way of working, I guess. But actually, as people come back to work, and don't forget, for a lot of our lone workers, they've been furloughed. So they've been away from work for a long time, or they've changed the way that they've worked. There may be skills fade. And it may be that the training that we can give them has also changed. We can't do, I don't know, it's March the 16th, it's kind of indelible in my brain at the moment, was the last time I was in a training room with a group of people. And so businesses are having to think about different ways to train lone workers. How do you do that? At a time where we're increasing, it's unplanned, there's more people doing it than we thought there'd be, they're doing different jobs. How do I train them? How do I get that message out to them about how to do this safely, securely, and to make sure that their well-being is okay as well? And I think actually one of the big things that we've noticed as a business is the attitude of organisations has changed. I can think of at least 2 clients who have now got people doing lone working jobs where before, in their policies and procedures, those jobs were not allowed to be done as lone workers. And as I say, for all sorts of reasons, they're now going, well, if we don't get the job done. So we've had to change the way that we look at it. So I think there are things that have changed. The level of risk, as I say, I kind of expand on that a little bit more. When I first started doing this kind of work 25 years ago, it was all around the personal safety and security of lone workers, and that was about verbal abuse, threatening behaviour, violence and aggression, etc. And a certain level of kind of sexual assault, sexual harassment and inappropriate behaviour as well. Has that changed in COVID? Well, I think probably it has, because the people that we're going out to meet are perhaps different than they were previously. And what I mean by that is they themselves have got stress levels that are higher. They have fear levels that are higher. There's an amazing book that was written by a lady called Dr. Vida Pearson, and she talks about the causes of aggression in the workplace. And she talks about this idea that if you create feelings of fear, frustration, or humiliation in the people you come into contact with, then it's likely that there would be, or at least more likely, there'll be some kind of level of aggression or violence. And think about what COVID's done. Think about that word fear. We know we've got clients now that are trying to go back out into other people's homes, and people don't want them in their homes. There's a fear level there. Even if they're there giving care to people, they know they need that support, they know they need that assistance, but they don't want people stepping over their threshold and bringing the outside world into their homes. So there's a fear level there. And even just when people are out and about, you see it yourself, standing in queues. I was in a supermarket queue the other day where a bit of a spat kind of, yeah, we're actually back to supermarket queues again, aren't we? Can you believe it? There was a bit of a spat because somebody had got too close, and it was like, oh, you've forgotten the 2-metre rule. And this guy went, oh, it doesn't matter because we're outside. And the other guy went, of course it matters. And then 2 or 3 other people kind of got involved. And of course, the guy who was on the front door of the supermarket felt obliged to come over and kind of calm it down. Well, where's that come from? Again, it's fear and it's frustration. Now, humiliation, I'm not sure whether this has, but certainly the fear and frustration levels have gone up for a lot of people. So I think there are instances. Kristen and I have just been doing a project with one of the rail companies, and it's been about how to effectively but carefully and without creating conflict talk to people about wearing their face coverings. And of course, people don't want to. So it's another point of conflict, another reason why there might be that cause for aggression. Sudden illness, medical crisis. The obvious thing is obviously thinking about COVID and if somebody caught COVID. But don't forget there's all the other general health and safety issues that we've got going on for health and for lone workers. And that's if people are out and about on their own. You know, we've got people who work for forestry. There's people not around. What if there was an incident? How would they know? How would they raise the alarm and let somebody know that there was a difficulty, etc.? But if they're working at home, how would you know if somebody was acutely ill? Is that our responsibility? We'll look at that later on when we talk with Nigel and Matt. But certainly that's an issue. But the biggest one I think that's changed, and the one that we are getting more calls from clients than about anything else, is the stuff around the home working. And that's the effects of isolation, the stress, the mental health and wellbeing. And we're going to talk to Layla about this a little bit later on. But before we do, I wanted to share with you, I think this has also changed how people feel about lone working. Now, this was a piece of research that was done by the Home Worker Wellbeing Survey, it's called, and it was done by the Institute for Employment Studies. Now, I was a little bit disappointed to see that we're still on interim results from April, and here we are in kind of October, but they told us back in April that this is how people were feeling working from home. Not calm or relaxed, frequently feeling isolated, and not cheerful and good spirits. Now, some of that you might say, well, we've kind of got used to it and we found ways of managing it and dealing with it. But some of it, I'm not so sure. If I felt isolated back in March and I'm still working on my own and maybe living on my own and really having no contact with the outside world, then that level of isolation is going to go up massively. But it's not just our mental health well-being, it's our physical health as well. I mean, look at this. Headaches, migraines, aches and pains in the neck. Is that to do with the ergonomics of how we've set ourselves up at home? You know, how many people are still working on a sofa, balanced on a coffee table or a kitchen table? You know, some people are lucky enough to have an office and can drag in the chair from work. But for the vast majority of people that you may have working for you, that's not the case. So, you know, that's a real challenge, I think. Just the simple thing of taking less exercise. There are 15 steps between my bed and my office. That's not great exercise first thing in the morning. Now, I'll be honest, and I do things like try and walk the dog or, you know, that kind of stuff. But for a lot of people, if you are isolated, and this is going to get worse as the weather gets worse, you know, I might go, oh, well, I'll go for a walk before I start. But if I look out the window and it's raining, I'm not going to bother. So actually, mentally and physically, it's having an impact. There were a couple of other things, actually, but I wasn't quite sure which camp they fit into, so you can kind of decide for yourselves on this one. But almost half people said they were working long and irregular hours, feeling under too much pressure to do work, and that work-life balance is out the window. You know, when you're working from home, when does work start in the morning? When does work finish? And that can be really challenging, and we have to help people look at that. And our lone workers are really struggling with that. And we know that because we're out there talking to them. So I think it's something we have to be thinking about. So how do we put in control measures? Well, look, We're going to talk about this throughout the whole afternoon, but I just want to kind of flag up a few things that are important. We do need to assess the risk, and you should be doing risk assessments that take into account this new way of working, which has come around because of COVID. But I think it's really important, especially when we're looking at our lone workers, that we somehow measure not only the real risk, so kind of the true risk as it were, but that perception of risk, how people feel, that fear about COVID, for example. If you've got people who are going out into the community, what are their levels of fear about catching COVID? And you might have people who are, in the BAME groups where there's more concerns, or, we have an ageing population of workers, they may well be more concerned. They still want to get out there and do the job, but they are concerned about that level of infection. Think about how we can design the environment or activity. I've seen some amazing kind of control measures being put in places in offices that allow people to come back in, work together, whilst apart, if that makes sense. So it's screens, it's kind of layouts of the rooms, it's the pathways, the one-way systems and things like that we're all kind of used to. But there are challenges there, because actually I put all those great things in. I have bubbles that say, look, 3 people come in on a Monday, 3 people come in on a Tuesday. But then if I'm one of those 3 that's coming in on a Tuesday and my 2 colleagues decide they're not coming in for some reason, suddenly I'm a lone worker and nobody might even be aware of it. So we need to think about the communication mechanisms that we've got in place. How do I communicate with my staff to make sure that they're okay? What kind of conversations do I have? Those safety conversations, those wellbeing conversations. And as a manager, if I'm worried about my own safety and my own wellbeing, how do I balance those 2 things as well? And I think what we've got to do is to give all of our lone workers real clear rules, guidance and permission to say, I'm not coping, I'm not managing with this chair, with this desk, I'm not managing with the level of aggression I'm getting out there, I'm just not managing with the isolation that I'm feeling. I need to find another way of doing this. And look, Zoom is great, and I love Kristen's analogy of this being kind of Zoom university, but I think also I'm a bit zoomed out, if I'm honest. Sometimes those conversations feel really uncomfortable, and I had a chat with a couple of people who are lone working for one of our clients the other day, and they were saying that their manager had put in place what they thought was an amazing Monday morning, Wednesday morning, Friday morning. Let's all have a check-in and see how they're feeling. Tell us what you've been doing this weekend. And one of them said, and I just thought it was so sweet, but she said, it reminded me like being back at school when you had like the sit down on the carpet time and tell us what you've been doing over the weekend. She said, and when I was at school, I just used to make things up because I didn't have a very exciting weekend. She said, and I can feel myself doing that now. It's not helping me. It's putting me under pressure to come up with some tale to tell or something to kind of have an input where actually I just want to get on with my work. So we need to recognise that we're lone workers, but also very different workers. People will need different things. So we need to think about how we provide that training to update those skills and the knowledge to help people deal with it, whether that's knowledge about their own well-being and safety in their own home, whether it is about conflict in the new world, whatever it might be. And as a training organisation, we are having to find new ways of doing this. I mean, we were in a very lucky position that we work very closely with a production company, so we've been able to produce films. We've been doing it for a long time anyway, and that's become something that's become a real gift for us to be able to use with our clients. But we're also using e-learning packages. We are doing virtual workshops. We're doing webinars like this. There are lots of different ways that you can do this, and it's also sometimes that one-to-one mentoring that we're asked to do as well. So you just have to think, just because training's difficult doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. And if one of the new risks is the skills fade and the lack of training, then your control measures ought to look at how you fix that. There's the obvious stuff about PPE if appropriate. And finally, it's also about the support, that business as usual support on a day-to-day basis to make people know that they're okay, that there's people they can turn to and talk to, that they're checking in on you, and there is somebody I can just turn to and go, do you know what, I have no idea I can get this to work on my laptop, and normally I'd nip down to IT, but there's nobody there, so who do I call to do that kind of thing? Just something as simple as that can be massively stressful if you're a lone worker. Or the phone call that somebody takes, and remember they're probably taking this in their own home, where the person on the other end of the phone is quite abusive towards them or insulting towards them. That feels different now to them. If I took that phone call in my office, there's kind of a professional pause, a professional gap between me and the person on the other end of the phone. But that person's come into my house now. Does that make me feel different? So I need to make sure that there's not only that support on a day-to-day basis, but also backup for incidents that happen when they're out there. I think really the key message for anything else that I would say is we need to let our lone workers know that they're not alone now more than ever before. So look, I'm going to stop rabbiting on now. There's lots of time to kind of hear from me again later on during the sessions, but I just wanted to kind of give you a broad overview and some insight to kind of what we're hearing from our clients. So back to you,
Nicole. Thanks for that broad overview. I think it helps a lot. I mean, the one question that comes to my mind just briefly is, are there any upsides to this?
Yeah, of course there is. I mean, the upside for me is I can get up in the morning and go for a run because I don't have to be on the train. The upside is I've got the flexibility to do a bit of gardening in the afternoon and come and work in the evening if I so desire.
Yes.
So there is flexibility that comes with it, and there's flexibility for businesses and for individuals, most definitely. But we just got to make sure we balance that out.
Good. A good thing to remember. And now, would you introduce us to our next segment with the Health and Safety Executive?
I will. At this point, I was really excited to be able to introduce Barbara Hockey. However, Barbara can't be with us today for personal reasons. But as the true professional that she is, she sent us a little video. So Barbara has been working with the HSE for a long time. She's the head of vulnerable workers team, and she works in their policy department looking at kind of how they give out guidance to businesses. And we worked with Barbara first. It was, I think, 2 years ago now. Well, this would have been the third year. So 2 years ago, Barbara came along to the conference, the Lone Worker Safety Live. And from that, and I'm actually quite proud to say this, that was the catalyst that made her go back to the HSE and say, we need to update our guidance. We need to look at the information we're giving out to businesses that tells them about lone working. We need to look at whether our definition works and kind of the advice we're giving. So they've put together new web pages. There's the new guidance which came out in March, and there's a new animation piece that's coming out. So I'm going to let Barbara tell you a little bit more about it in her own words via video link. And then I'll show you something when she's finished. So let's just hear from Barbara first. Kristen, can you just give me the thumbs up that you can hear Barbara speak when this starts?
Hi everyone. For those that don't know me, I'm Barbara Hockey and I'm head of the Vulnerable Workers Policy Team in HSE. Part of my responsibility is providing guidance for lone workers. Unfortunately, I can't join you today for the virtual conference, but I wanted to share with you some of the advice we've been given to help businesses and workers manage their health and safety, particularly vulnerable workers in light of COVID-19. So let me start with lone workers first of all. We all know that the world of work has changed. Lone working is not just about safety critical roles. Many more people are working remotely. Employment contracts are no longer just employer and employee, and there's much more recognition of the effects of mental health and well-being in the workplace. When we became aware of this, we started looking at revising our guidance, and earlier this year, on the 2nd of March, we published dedicated web pages and a leaflet. It's now been updated to recognise the different types of lone worker, how we work differently because of technology and demographics, and the wider health impacts of stress and fatigue. It highlights how employers can manage the risks, what their responsibilities are, and the support they can give to their workers, and advice for those who work alone on how to take care of their own health and safety. Less than 3 weeks after the publication, we were in a national lockdown because of COVID-19, with huge numbers of people advised to work from home where possible. Since then, we've had nearly 200,000 hits onto the webpage and over 2,500 downloads of the leaflet. So I think that we can take that as an indication that that's some of the advice that was really needed at that time and over the last few months. HSE has been at the heart of the government's guidance on how to work safely and how to make workplaces COVID secure, and given some real practical support on following the risk assessment process. One of the really good pages is on how to set up a home workstation, with a video that explains the best way to work and how to sit and how to prevent the musculoskeletal problems. What we say is really important is for employers to make sure they know how their workers are managing at home, any problems they are facing, And that could be from having the right equipment, to the home environment, to not being suitable for working from home, or just generally how people are mentally managing with the changes. There's been a lot of focus on working at home, and that's understandable because of the number of people who are having to do this, who've probably only ever done it occasionally beforehand, and particularly in when we were in a national lockdown, when there was a significant proportion of people working at home. And those who've been involved with the Lone Worker Conference before will know that the topics that have been familiar to all of you suddenly became important to everybody else. Thinking about how to keep in touch with colleagues, and those experiencing feelings of isolation, having difficulty in staying motivated, and getting the balance right when separating work from home. But not every job can be done from home, and COVID-19 has made us all rethink the health and safety of every role. What is the work activity? How is it done? And what additional controls can be put in place to make it COVID secure? The key control measures for avoiding the transmission of the virus have not changed. It's still about social distancing where possible, good hygiene and cleaning regimes, and good ventilation. Whilst for most lone workers, social distancing is not a major issue, for some, for example, those who provide care in a household or in the community, they will need to have in place additional control measures. Our guidance helps to think about what those controls could be. And we recommend talking to workers, having the conversation that allows for any concerns to be shared and addressed. This is sometimes known as the COVID conversation, and we know many businesses and organisations who have worked with their safety representatives to encourage this to happen. And where it's most successful is that collaboration between all of those involved in the workforce to come up with the solutions and rethink what are the right controls and what will work in that particular workplace. This is even more important for those workers who were shielding at the beginning of lockdown and fall into the category of clinically extremely vulnerable, or maybe live with someone who is clinically extremely vulnerable. If you're not sure who falls into this category, there are the full details on the gov.uk website, which can be linked from our vulnerable worker web pages. The Public Health England Disparities Report identified groups who may be at a higher risk of severe illness if they contract COVID-19. And this includes older males, those with pre-existing health conditions, those with a higher body mass index, or are from some Black, Asian and minority ethnic backgrounds. Our advice is that employers do not need to do individual risk assessments for these workers, as the control measures in place should apply to all workers. In short, a workplace should be COVID secure for all workers. Another potentially vulnerable group is pregnant workers. There's been a lot of concern around pregnant workers being discriminated against, but I want to stress that the health and safety responsibilities have not changed. There is a long-standing legal requirement for employers to make sure that the workplace is safe, where a significant health and safety risk is identified for a new or expectant mother. If the necessary control measures cannot be put in place, such as adjustments to the job or working from home, pregnant workers should be suspended on paid leave. This is in line with normal responsibilities under Regulation 16.3 of the Management of Health and Safety at Work Regulations 1999, for those that like to know the legal source of that. But it's an important point, as there have been reports about pregnant workers being made to take unpaid leave, sick pay, or start their maternity leave early, which is not the correct action. I think it's also worth taking a step back to look at some of the potential positives that we can take from the last 6 months or so. The flexibility that some workers have had to work alternative hours to fit around family commitments and different caring responsibilities they may have. The opportunity to spend time with their families, and for some of us to spend more time doing hobbies or things like exercise, or simply the joy of avoiding that daily commute. I think, we recognise the way communication has improved for a lot of people, and where we take the time not just to check on the productivity and has the job been done, but also how are you and how's your well-being. And it looks like we've got these changes in how we work, they're going to continue for some time. So with many people working predominantly at home alone, we need to build on what has worked well and make sure that everyone is safe at work, whether they're working at home, alone at their usual workplace, or working alone in lots of different places. So that's just a really quick update from me on some of the advice we've got available. If anybody has any further questions that they can't find the answers to off the website, wants to get in touch with me, I'm very happy to take any queries after the webinar's finished. But before I go, I just want to share with you a preview of a short video that we've created to support our lone worker guidance. It's just another tool that helps highlight some of the issues and might be worth sharing with colleagues. And I didn't want to pass up the opportunity to share it with you. It still needs just a final few tweaks, so it's not quite ready to be distributed just yet. However, as soon as it is ready in the next week or so, I'll make sure the link's available. I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference and take care. Thanks.
Okay, so a few words from Barbara. I understand that some of you were struggling in terms of being able to hear that, so I'm not quite sure why that happened. I'm just going to check on my settings here.
As an employer.
Oh, okay, I don't quite know. Could you hear that when it came in, Kristen?
Yes, but she was quiet.
Okay, that's okay. If bear with me a second, I'm just going to stop share and I'm going to start share again just to see if I can make that come in any louder, because I'd like to be able to share with you obviously the little animation. So it's great to have Barbara, and I'm so pleased that she managed to do a little video for us even though she wasn't here with us herself, which was great. And as I say, she promised to show us this preview. Now, at the point when she promised to show it to us, it was going to be like almost finished, but actually it's kind of a bit of a way off. However, true to their word and true to their promise, they've allowed us to have a look at it anyway. So what you're going to see is the video, which is kind of almost finished, but the voiceover on it is actually the voice of the animator. So he's not a voiceover artist, it's not what he does for a living, but he just wanted you to know roughly where it was going to go. So you're going to hear him kind of talk us through it and stumble over the words a little bit a couple of times, but he does a really cracking job. So it's just useful to see what they've done. And this, as I say, Barbara said, will be up on their website. Once we get the full version, we'll make sure that it's linked as well. So let's try this and see whether you can hear this any better.
As an employer, you must manage health and safety risks before people can work alone. This applies to anyone contracted to work for you, including self-employed people. Risks are greater for lone workers without other people to help if something goes wrong. Lone workers include delivery drivers, health workers, security and cleaning staff, shop workers, and people working at home. You must train lone workers to identify hazards and control the risks. This will help them cope in unusual situations and know when to ask for help. Provide supervision in any high-risk situations you have identified in your workplace risk assessment. If an employer is at someone else's workplace, you must ask the employer about any control measures to make sure they are protected if working alone. Monitor your lone workers and keep in touch with them. Make sure they understand any monitoring system and procedures or devices you use. Put emergency procedures in place and make sure lone workers know how to use them. For example, having first aid equipment and how to use it on themselves, and raising an alarm in emergencies. New lone workers should also be supervised if they are being trained, doing a job with specific risks, dealing with new situations. Make sure you support home workers. You have the same health and safety responsibility for them and the same liability for accident or injuries as for any other worker. Lone working does not always mean higher risks of violence, but it does make workers more vulnerable. Put measures in place to support any worker who's experienced violence. Workers can play their part by identifying and reporting incidents. Training in personal safety or violence prevention will help them recognize situations where they feel at risk and use conflict resolution techniques or leave the workplace. Lone working can cause stress and affect mental health. Put procedures in place to monitor lone workers so managers can quickly recognise the signs of stress. If contact is poor, lone workers may feel disconnected, isolated, or abandoned. Remember to train, supervise, and monitor lone workers. Keep in touch and respond to any incident. By following these simple steps, you can protect those working alone.
So there you go. So you can hear me again now, sorry. I think it's a really cool little animation, actually. I think it'll be really useful, and I can imagine a lot of people using that as like little short safety sessions and as the beginning of safety sessions, etc. And I think, as I say, it was really nice of Barbara to share this with us and to preview it at the conference today, and hopefully we'll get the full one and say put that up there. It's also really good of Barbara to say that she's happy to answer questions. Obviously she was going to do that live today, so I would say if you have got a specific question for Barbara, if you want to type that into the Q&A box anyway with question for Barbara at the top, we can make sure that she answers that, and then we will host those on our website and send out links to everybody to let them know that that question has been answered. It's too good an opportunity to have the HSE and not ask them questions about kind of their thoughts on this, so just useful stuff.
I wondered, Nicole, if partly they're doing this, it's interesting that it's been good timing, because I'm wondering, thinking back to your talk and now also thinking about Barbara, whether, you know, lone working has been a smaller percentage of the workforce in general. I wonder now, post-COVID and you know, as we continue with COVID, whether it will become a greater and greater percentage of workers and how that will impact everything.
Yeah, I mean, certainly we've got clients now where they were lone workers were the minority, who are now the majority. The majority of our people lone work. I've heard that from a couple of people. So I think that this is something that's very timely for the HSE to have done this. I know Barbara and I had a conversation about that she was glad that they'd put in home working, because previously in their previous guidance, it wasn't included. There was a separate, and there still is a separate guidance on home working, but they've actually recognised that as a category in the lone workers. So I think that was very timely that came out. So so that was good. So yeah, as I say, any questions that you've got for the HSE, for Barbara, we can send those off to her. I know that she'll be really good at answering them, and we'll get those put up on the website afterwards. So I'm going to hand back over to you though, Kristen, for now, and our next speaker. Oh, there you go. Norma's played it again.
We loved it so much. Let's hear it again. Maybe later. Maybe you can watch it on play again. But now, here, next, Worthwhile Training has had the pleasure of working with a co-op in the past couple of years, and the co-op is a really good example of an organization that initially took lone worker security seriously, but now they've even adjusted their approach due to COVID-19. And Jane Crow here is the subject matter expert for security at the co-op, and this is the second line role for the functions of retail, logistics, funeral care, legal services, and first line for their support centers. And today, Jane is going to talk about how the co-op identified a gap across the organization and discuss how they reached out to Worthwhile Training and internal stakeholders to address this gap, and basically tell us what they're doing to produce online training for all their agile workers. So welcome, Jane. I hope you're there. Are you there, Jane? Hello, Jane.
Thank you very much, Kristen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Nicole and Kristen, for the invite. And yeah, it's a shame that it's not down in London, but hopefully next year. And thanks very much for explaining what my role is. It makes it a lot easier for me. So the story for the co-op, for me personally, sort of started 18 months ago when I met Nicole at Birmingham. She was doing a presentation on lone working, and I sat there with somebody from our procurement team and our food team, and it was absolutely amazing. And I sort of took quite a lot away from it around the security aspect and health and safety, which I'm not the subject matter expert. We have a team of people behind that do that for us. But following on from that seminar, I also went to another seminar, actually this time last year down in London, and I took a health and safety colleague along with me. And from that, we sort of then went back to the business to sort of say, what have we got in place? So Vicky, who came with me, she sort of said, well, I know there's the policy, I've written the policy around lone working. So we knew we'd got that in place. But as Christian's alluded to, you know, we are a massive organisation. So we sort of engaged with Vicky's line manager, Sue, who, you know, health and safety manager right across the co-op. And we just needed to actually assess that we needed a whole process right across co-op and have it as a one approach. So next slide, please, Nicole. Lovely, thank you. So our first challenge was, where do we start? Where are our lone workers? So if we look, we've got food retail, but they've got their own sort of team of people that look at the lone workers, the shop assistants, the team managers, and we sort of, from a second line response, I knew that we were working on lone workers. So it was very much, right, what else have we got for the lone workers out there? And I was out in London with some colleagues, area managers, and some field-based colleagues, and sort of saying to them, well, actually, are you a lone worker? And they all sort of came back and said, no, I'm not. Well, why aren't you a lone worker? You go out in your car, you go on the tube, you do this, you're doing that between stores. So you are actually classed as a lone worker. So that was very much from sort of the retail base. And I'd been a field-based colleague in the past and never really thought of myself as a lone worker until Nicole's presentation. We then sort of reached out to our buyers. You know, we're renowned for fair trade. We go all over the world. And we've got sort of our technical team, buyers, that don't just do national travel, but they also do international travel. So it was very much around, right, okay, then what processes have we got in place for them? We have logistics. So we have our drivers that are going from a logistical site to a store. Sometimes they get approached. Sometimes somebody will jump on the back of the wagon, they'll jump off and whatever. How do we get to know about these? How do we know if they've been involved in an accident or whatever? They are the lone worker. Again, they have field-based colleagues. Funeral care, we have funeral arrangers that work in a home that are on their own, and a family can come in quite distressed, just lost loved ones. They actually are the lone workers as well. What processes have we got in place for them? Again, they have field-based colleagues as well. Legal services, which was one that absolutely blew my mind away. So I'd seen offices because of my frontline support to them. But when you start talking to them and you've got them sitting there and you're saying to them, well, you know, how do you get the business? Is it just on the phone call? No, we have probate team, will writing services where colleagues go out, and again, they're in people's homes, and that was a challenge for us as well, as to how do we know if that home is actually safe for our colleague to go into. We also have pioneer members. You know, the government and everybody is saying so much around community work. Our pioneer members are our community. They are in the community. They do meetings until late at night. They could have a 2-hour journey home across country lanes and whatever. How do we know that they've got home safely? All of this is our actual responsibility. Corporate staff, colleagues that go into the offices that I manage from the first line support, they go in first thing in the morning. There might not be anybody else out on their floor. You know, at One Angel Square in Manchester, where we operate from as a corporate office, it's 14 floors. It's very open, and people could just be sitting there on their own. They could be sat in a pod working because they've got timelines to meet and whatever. They could really do with having somebody just walking past them. Are you okay? Is everything okay? property team that go out and manage our estate right across, whether it be facilities managers, fire, security, and everybody else that we have within the property team. A lot of those are actually lone workers. We also have our own healthcare team that are based in Lee Green in Warrington, and sometimes, you know, even though they are offering an online service, they can actually be within that location on their own. So if we go back slightly, and I've sort of said that we do national and international travel, we do have a travel policy, but when we talked about the travel policy, we realised that there's a few issues around the process. So if we went to our travel provider and sort of said to them, can you tell us who our lone workers are, where they are they in London? You know, we've had so many major incidents in London, or, you know, so close to home with MEN attack. But also, if people are traveling abroad, are the hotels that they're staying in, are they in a safe environment? You know, they could be out on a limb because the budget didn't really stretch to them sort of staying in the main location. And so all of these were challenges for us. And again, working with procurement, we've actually managed to address that sort of issue around the procurement and making sure. So line managers can now oversee where colleagues are staying, and sort of, if it's not in a safe environment, they can TripAdvisor and things like that, and actually address it and turn around to our travel provider and sort of say, no, we're not happy with the colleagues staying there, they've got to stay in this location and whatever. So that was a great big build on that. And also, if an incident does happen, so there was the London Bridge last year attack, we could actually communicate out to our colleagues that were down in London to sort of say, absolutely fantastic, you know, this has happened, don't go to that location, don't go to those tube stations, use this area or that area. So it actually gave us a little bit more comfort that we knew where our colleagues were. And as I say, you know, we know that it's our ultimate responsibility to look after our lone workers. Anyway, that we needed to know where we were across the organisation as well, but it grew and grew and grew, these lone workers and whatever. So we were in a happy place. But when we actually got all this information together, there was myself and health and safety manager Sue, who sort of went to our line manager and the chief risk officer. We presented to him all our information and said, right, we need your support. Will you support us in going out to the rest of the business areas to say, we need to fill this gap, we need to address the lone workers? And he said, yes, carry on, go and do what you need to do. So we did. Next slide, please, Nicole. So this was our sort of the last 12 months journey, if you like. So as I say, we raised the profile of the lone working to co-op leaders. So we had to address who the stakeholders were. We'd sort of reached out to the chief risk officer and said, need your support. Whilst we were trying to establish who the leaders were or who the stakeholders would be that needed to attend this, I also invited Nicole to come and do a whole presentation, because she could do it so much better than myself because of the knowledge that Nicole's got, and to actually present it across as to who the lone workers are, what we needed to do. And there was one particular slide on the presentation that sort of said, where are we now? And when you look at the whole estate and sort of see where we were and how big the estate were, we'd got different sort of levels of support from colleagues. So, you know, if you look at the member pioneers, they were probably further down the line than other areas and whatever. So by getting everybody together, we could sort of say, right, where are we? And there was like 5 or 6 steps which sort of said, where are we? Do we actually care? And as a co-op, yes, we ultimately care about everybody. So what actions do we need to do for incidents? So we do have an online reporting tool. Does everybody report it? No, some people were still sort of, oh, didn't realise that we had to report any incident like that. So that was really a challenge to us as well. And then working all the way through to, we need to work safely and healthily, but how do we get there? And we need to do it as a team right across the co-op. So when the presentation was delivered by Nicole and myself to sort of support that, that was probably just over 9 months ago. We got the one co-op working group together, and then a few months ago we sort of got them back into the room and said, right, you've had the presentation, you've dealt with Christmas, come back and talk to us and tell us where we're actually at now. And this was just before COVID hit, and again, some of them still weren't along the lines of, yep, you know, we've got these processes in place, this is how we communicate with everybody and things. But obviously we'd got others that had really taken it on board and were doing so much more. And we sort of pulled all that information together and we shared it out with people and asked them to go away and sort of reflect on what was required. All of a sudden COVID hit, and it was like, you know, everybody, every organisation, and we didn't stop. You know, we had logistics, we had food, we had funeral care, we had every part that could continue being primary workers, key workers. That was us. So the challenges were very much, you know, 100% got to run at this and got to do it. And that's what we did, as the co-op would do. So after the restrictions reduced and relaxed a little bit, we reached back out to the stakeholders to say to the stakeholders, what have you now done? How have you reflected on that? How have you got that message across to what might have only been 10, 15 lone workers, which has now doubled, trebled, whatever? How have you got those messages out? And, you know, we've got a fantastic executive team that were doing weekly communications to people. You know, it's safe not to feel safe. You know, you can talk to us. There's so many other areas of the business that will help you, well-being and things like that. So they'd always give out a weekly briefing, if you like, to everybody, and it was absolutely fantastic. You know, you were waiting for that communication to come out. If there was any changes that Boris sort of came up with, that the government were talking about, it was communicated out. Just yesterday, after Boris's announcement, we were doing announcements out to the whole team. Absolutely fantastic. But all the way along this, we have engaged with our own learning and development team, and we sort of agreed that 2021 was when we were going to come up with a training package. But talking to HR and the wellbeing team and lots of other people, it was very much we need to get something out 2020. And funny enough, just prior to this call today, this webinar, the information's come through for the training package, which I now need to go and look for, to look through to make sure that this package will be right for the team to deliver in November. And that's been absolutely great. It's looking fun, it's looking informative, and it will be reviewed annually. It's going to be a one co-op approach, but with each individual business having links into it so that they can make it their own afterwards. So we're having a bespoke one, but then linking it into each individual business. Other areas that we've sort of looked at are personal devices. So, you know, a lot of people might understand that the co-op retail side, we've got body worn cameras we're trialing it with our logistics sites, with our stores. You know, they're seeing increased abuse, aggro, you know, the assaults that they're getting, being spat at. You know, it's not nice out there for our colleagues. We're also working on an app between us and our security provider and our digital team, which will then be able to promote or say to people, it's safe to go to that part of the country, no, it's not safe to go there. yes, you can go here, you can go there. So that there's some other good things. Sorry, Nicole, I should have asked you for the next slide. We're understanding that there's a shift in the colleague wellbeing as well. So there's quite a lot of support that we have with that, a co-op care team. And then other things that we're actually doing that people have just sort of taken off their own head to do is reaching out to people that are in a home on their own, you know, that probably in a flat on their own, and don't see people from one day to the next. Or like we've said on the call already, you know, these Zoom, Teams, whatever, you're not getting that personal interaction. So it's very much, let's have a virtual brew. You know, I'm based in Stoke-on-Trent. I don't go into Manchester. I've been into Manchester once since this has all kicked in. But it is nice to see people and just not be on a meeting, just have that casual chat with somebody, having a talk to them to see what they've actually done recently away from work. It's absolutely great. And then if we can just slip on to the last slide, please. So again, really, it's just recapping and protecting our colleagues. So we've got the full backing of the wellbeing and HR support. You know, we've looked at equipment and things like that from a health and safety perspective. Our health and safety team have done an amazing job with making sure that people are getting the right equipment, whatever it be. As I say, myself working with the health and safety team to put this package together, and the learning and development team. But overall, it's taken a year to get there, but you know, to understand who our lone workers are. We've also developed recently an agile working policy. So that understanding of, are you allowed to start work at 10 o'clock today? Or has it got to be 8 o'clock? No, if you're going to go off and do something, you know, like Nicole was saying earlier, walking the dog or whatever, you haven't got to walk out of the bed, walk out of your bedroom straight into your office and start working and things like that. So we have got that agile working policy in place. And as I say, I'm just looking forward to next month and launching the training package. It will be amazing. And that is where the co-op are now. So any questions?
Thank you, Jane. That's excellent. It sounds like you're really positive about all this development. It's taken time, but you've linked all these stages and built kind of from the leadership team on down and brought people with you. So that's really exciting. I do have a question kind of that's come in. They're wondering, do you utilize technology to monitor your lone workers, or do you rely on them self-reporting any issues?
It's both, really.
Okay.
So yes, we do have technology, so they do, if there are any reports that need to come in, they can do it. They must record everything, so any incident that they have will be electronic. But yeah, it really depends on the location and the business area that they're actually in as to whether we're digitally connected. But in the last few months, you know, people that were on VDE that were working in Manchester or working in a location have now, by the end of this year, everybody will have a laptop. So, you know, we have invested heavily in making sure that they've got the right tools to do the right job.
Great. And do you feel that they know how to use them in the right way for you? I mean, are they buying into it? Are they using them effectively, yes, would you say?
Yeah. I mean, we have a Yammer chat. So if anybody's got a problem, sometimes the network's going slow or whatever, all you have to do, I've done it myself, drop a line on Yammer. Within a few minutes, somebody from the IT team is coming back to you and responding to you. And if not, they'll give you a quick call to make sure that they can help you and that you can carry on with your day job. We've had technical issues, you know, I'm not going to lie, but that it's well communicated and you're not just getting it through on an email or whatever. They will text you, Yammer it, however else it could even go on to Twitter and things like that, that we are experience problems.
Well, you know,
On
that
note.
was one thing that came through your talk, was that the crucial component is communication, and you underscored that. And I guess that's part of the key of how you pulled everybody together and how you integrated this and made it effective, is that I don't think we can underestimate communication.
No, we are good at it at the co-op.
That's good. Nicole, do you have anything you want to throw in about how you integrated with a co-op?
One thing I would just say about working with a co-op was I remember the sessions really clearly, Jane, and I remember the senior session especially, because it was probably one of the most feisty workshops I'd run in a long time, which was brilliant, because I think they thought they were going to come in a room and just get presented to. And when I said, oh, we're going to workshop this, and you know, you could see their faces like, really, we're going to have to do some work? But actually it was fantastic, because they really bought into it, didn't they, and kind of really engaged in the whole process. And when we went out and I did some lone worker training for, well, actually I'm going to say probably 90% of the people in the room were males, and you could see them walking through the door going, oh, why are we doing lone working training? We don't need this. But by the end of it, they were all kind of, oh my goodness, we didn't realise there was so much stuff. And they'd been talking about their issues, as you said, about hotels maybe not being as comfortable as in some areas as they would like. They hadn't realised how many hours they'd been working, and kind of that work-life balance stuff. So all of the sessions were really, really conversational, which was fantastic. You know, really people were challenging it. And for me, it spoke volumes about the ethos of the co-op, that you were allowing your people to speak. And I thought that was great, right the way from senior right the way through to people who are frontline out doing the job. So that was really good.
Yep. Lovely.
That's great. Good. Well, I don't know if there's any other questions we have. It's a good thing to see how somebody's really making this happen. We could, if anyone would like to, feel free to take a break at any time and pop back in. We will be here. Just, you know, come back and we're here.
This is probably a good idea to take a break at this point.
Yeah.
But thank you, Jane. We've also got, before Matt and Nigel, Kristen, we've got a poll that we can use. I know that some people weren't able to answer the polls, and my guess is that's because you've joined via a browser rather than via the Zoom app. Or sometimes it means that your system has disabled pop-ups, which means the pop-up won't appear in the middle of the screen. So I apologise if that's the case. We're not ignoring your answers, but unfortunately technology has overcome us, or has got past us on this occasion. So you won't be able to poll. But I thought it might be interesting, while people are having a little bit of a break, if those that are still here, if they want to have a look at this and see. Matt and Nigel are going to be talking about health and safety stuff in general. I know Nigel loves that word, stuff. But we're going to just ask people to think about, have they reviewed their risk assessments since COVID changes in the way that people work? So it'd be interested and see what they say. So while that's in action there, that might be, as I say, another opportunity for people to go and take a bit of a break as well. Hosts and panelists can't vote. No, I'm afraid you can't, guys. I'm sorry about that.
No. Can't rig the system. Can't vote twice. Can't mail in your ballot.
I kind of feel like I need to have a word with you about voting at some point, Kristen, but maybe today is not appropriate.
I have voted.
Oh, good. Well done.
I might again.
Fantastic. So we've got quite a few people. We've still got nearly 130 people online, so that's really good. 65 of who have voted so far. So I'm going to leave it open for a minute or two, just allow for Matthew and Nigel to be doing their power poses before they start doing their sessions, which is always good. Please remember, folks, questions are kind of what keeps this live and interactive. So if you've got any questions at all, it doesn't matter what it is, as long as it's kind of vaguely related to lone working, mental health, well-being, health and safety, or safety and security, personal safety and security, please feel free to pop that into the Q&A box at any point during the day. If we don't get back round to answering all of them, we will do it in a little Q&A on our website if we don't manage it today. So let's just have a look. Nigel and Matt, are you kind of ready? Are you there?
Both ready and good to go.
Fantastic. So here's the results, which might be interesting reading for you guys. So 58% of people said yes, they've reviewed their risk assessments since COVID changes in the way that they work, all done and dusted. 29% said still in process. I love the 1% who went, risk assessments? So maybe this session is especially for them, but we'll see. So there you go. So Kristen, I'll hand back to you.
Excellent. Thanks for that. Well, it is my pleasure to introduce you to a dynamic duo who are both directors of Human Applications, which is an independent risk management company based in Loughborough. Matthew Trigg specializes in supporting pragmatic risk assessment in large organizations, and he typically works with organizations with unusual risk profiles. Maybe he can hear more about that. Nigel Heaton provides advice to large government and commercial organizations on how best to manage corporate safety, health, and welfare risk, and he provides expert opinion on lone working, amongst, I'm sure, many other topics. So today, they're going to discuss the challenges of lone working in a post-COVID world, thinking differently about lone working health, safety, and well-being, and the challenges of managing risk. So over to you.
Hey, Kristen, thank you for that. Can you hear me okay?
You sound good.
Fantastic, that's good.
Right.
So we're going to try and move through this quickly so we can take as many questions as possible, but some of this will involve Nigel, so that'll slow stuff down when we get to him. This is a really quick summary. You know, there wasn't a playbook for a lot of what we've dealt with here. Significantly this, I think, lots of the changes that that we and you will have made will have been temporary in March and then temporary through May and June, and now we're in October. So I know many of you will start now locking down those systems as either just about temporary or newly permanent, and any honeymoon period we think is coming to an end. So pretty much anything you've got going on needs to be considered as normal. We're in a rather strange situation as a business, which is that we've had a period of normal different, and now we're coming back to normal. So we are again in a state of flux, and that I'd be interested to know if that's common from anybody who's listening in today. But the really big part, obviously, is that your safety management systems, the things that work for you all the rest of the time, need to change to keep up to reflect those changes. Can I have the next slide, please? Was it Kristen or Nicole's doing that? Nigel, this is you.
Yeah, okay. As Matt said, you know, I'm sure that we all know what the word of the year is going to be. It's this idea that the world has changed in unexpected ways. And my experience is that a lot of organizations actually need to get a grip on what it's all about. The first thing to say is actually risks to lone workers are not new. Organizations are suddenly going, oh my goodness, we've got all these people working at home, all these people working by themselves. Blimey, Charlie, what's going on there then? And it seems to me that actually not only are the risks not new, but actually the approach to managing risks to lone workers isn't new. It's well understood. How do we manage these risks? Mostly we ought to know. And one of the challenges that I see is a lot of the organizations I work for have kind of put on new processes, new procedures, new protocols to manage these so-called new risks to lone workers. And my experience is that where these new protocols, new processes have been in place, actually you add complexity, you add cost. One client was asked about a new DSE assessment plan, as if the risks to people from DSE are fundamentally different between an office and a by themselves. There are issues about equipment, there are issues about habits, but actually the risk is the same, and the proportionate approach to risk should be the same. But instead they'd been quoted £100,000 to put in a new DSE risk assessment process aimed at lone workers working at home. And it seems to me that actually, oh my goodness, what's happened to my slide? Something has.
We're definitely blameless, Nigel.
Thank goodness for that. Any chance? Oh, fantastic! Oh, one more. Fantastic.
Nicole.
Are you sending me a message there, Nicole? What the hell's happening?
I have no idea why the slides are moving. I'm not touching anything at all, but I'll try not to let it happen again.
I thought that was your usual approach to shutting me up and to managing me.
Just press the slide on.
Exactly.
Apologies.
Here is a thought for all of you. If you have complex and costly risk management systems for lone workers, sure as eggs is eggs, you will fail. The more complex your system, the more it costs. The cost does not necessarily result in a better output. As my illustrious colleague Matt is fond of saying, the Health and Safety at Work Act presupposes work. So your system should not be about avoiding work, not be about protecting absolutely the health and safety of your lone workers. What it should be is a really pragmatic way of getting your head around what the risks are. And if those aren't new risks, then you already have processes, you already have procedures to manage those risks. And it seems to me that the challenge for a load of managers, I'm currently working with a very large government body, and what they don't get is that when people work by themselves, two things are probably true. Firstly, the likelihood of them sustaining an injury, an incident, an accident, an adverse thing is probably increased, because actually it turns out when you've got somebody with you, they can change your behavior, they can encourage you. If you're interacting with other people, the other people you're interacting with are more likely to have a break on them because there's two of you. So we can see that there's an increase in likelihood going on. We can also see that actually there's a potential increase in impact, that the reasonably foreseeable worst case might get worse, because actually, do you know what, you're by yourself. So if you have an accident, there might be nobody to call, there's nobody to intervene, there's nobody to help you. However, what we're interested in is the really significant stuff. I'm going to suggest, dare I say it, that whilst you are working at home as a lone worker, probably whilst the risk has gone up, it hasn't gone up in a truly significant way. If we look at the reasonably foreseeable harm, it probably is the same as if you're working in the office. Now, you might be more at risk in terms of you've got a crappy old chair or a crappy old desk, or you haven't got a separate keyboard and monitor, but actually we should have a process to manage that anyway. What we're really interested in is where we've suddenly got this new breed of people who maybe went with a buddy and are now out and about, interacting with the public. I was appalled when we talked about the co-op about how aggressive people are. I've been offering some free consultancy to a large charity, and they told me when they'd opened up one of their car parks with a volunteer, it was booking only. Somebody rocked up to this car park without booking, and they actually spat at the blooming volunteer. I could not believe it. I was absolutely appalled. It seems to me that truly is a significant risk, entirely predictable, but my goodness, let's concentrate on that rather than concentrating on lone workers who are suddenly working from home. It seems to me that what we need to do is to really get our heads round where the big risks suddenly have arisen, where suddenly something has happened about the way we work, about the jobs that we do, and actually we can't just go, it is business as usual, or it is something that we care a little bit about. It's about knowing exactly where those big ticket risks are. And what we don't want to do is get swamped in the minor, in the minutiae, in the things where, do you know what, it's changed, but it's not that big a deal. And I also think there's a huge challenge. As Matt said, everybody's working quickly. Everybody's desperate to get back to business as usual, to get risk assessments in place, to put in controls, to put in processes, to try and address behaviours. And a lot of the time, it's really hard to show what you've done. And the HSC has been very explicit. They do intend to do more visits. We know that some EHOs have increased their visibility to organisations in terms of going and seeing what they're doing. And I think a lot of organisations have very weak audit trails. If we look at the requirements of the legislation around the management of risk, actually record keeping, unfortunately, is incredibly important. And I think that it would be a very remiss of an organisation that does a lot not to have a really robust audit trail. Kirsten said at the beginning, I do quite a lot of expert witness work, and mostly I look at paper trails and e-trails, and I interview people about not what they can remember, but what they can show me, how they can point to me at documents. And I think in a rapidly changing environment, where risks are rapidly evolving, where controls are being tried, dismissed, or implemented, it is incredibly important that you can prove that you've done stuff. As Nicole says, stuff's my favorite word, get out and do stuff. And if you do stuff, make sure that you can show that you've done it, because actually it is incredibly frustrating if you try loads of good ideas, some of which work, some of which doesn't, but you haven't got a record. What stuff did we try? Did it work? Did it not? How are we learning? And as an organization, you need that audit trail that shows you how you're developing and how you're learning and getting better. And on that bombshell, Matt, I think I've taken all your slides, so it's over to you to dazzle them with your wit and wisdom.
Not well. Specifically, Carrie Bow asked a question earlier on about, is it a legal requirement for a lone worker policy from the HSE? Just to clear that one up, obviously not to have a lone worker policy, but if you have lone working as a significant risk in your organisation, then you'll want to have a means of addressing it, and the chances are that'll be a policy somewhere. So it isn't an HSE requirement per se, but it might be one of the things that you ought to look to. But I hope that my next few slides ought to help you out with that. I'm going to just do 4 separate slides on these. I think if what you figured out, those of you who answered the poll, is that the approach for COVID was really to go back through your existing risk assessments and work out how you do distancing and how you do hygiene and reporting. The only place I think where I'm seeing, and Nigel is seeing, new places where you might not have noticed, forgive me, I'm sure many of you have, are in these 4 roles. That some people are now working remotely who weren't before, that's the obvious one. Some tasks done by one person, they were formerly done by 2, particularly if you've got something that involves driving and you've elected to have only one person in each vehicle. Third one, a little bit of a sneaky one, it's always been there really, but low occupancy increases the chance of being alone at work. So you're in a big building or a big office, normally there are 4 or 5 of you leaving at once, and all of a sudden because of low occupancy we're going to find that you are the sole person that's in there. And the last one is one that we have a particular interest in, which is about those particularly soft supervisory activities where it's now much harder to have FaceTime with people and see what's happening. So if I can just deal with those fairly quickly, Nicole, can you give me the next slide? Yay, brilliant. I think physical workstation stuff is fairly straightforward. It's dealt with in lots and lots of other places. And a few of you already said, I think somebody said in the comments earlier on, that as a long-term lone worker, they've never felt more connected than now everybody else is having to zoom in. So there are some real upsides to this. Nigel's already touched on managing workflow and some of the sensitive issues. If you've got a work team that deals with crises or deals with upset customers, then some of the protocols you'd normally have to manage that safety will be more difficult. Changes of circumstance might have additional effects, so people's personal circumstances might change in their home. There might be somebody who's just lost their job in the family who's now also kicking around the house, a whole bunch of things that will be tricky. But let's recognise that many people seem to love it. I suspect I may never see Nigel in the offices ever again because he's taken to just full-time dog care. And I think that does seem to split the nation. If you have a dog, you're probably quite enjoying working at home more than the rest of us. So that's the newly remote work thing. I think that one's relatively straightforward. If we can take the second one, Nicole. Thank you. Existing tasks now done alone. Driving is probably a big one. In particular, we are looking at those jobs that early in the summer, early in lockdown, were simply stopped because it wasn't possible to work in close proximity. And these would be odd ones, like people who are trying to hang heavy metal security doors. I suspect that probably Jane across the co-op estate has got lots and lots of 2-person jobs that couldn't happen because we couldn't find a way to distance. They've probably been resolved, but it's just possible that you've now ended up with jobs that were 2-person on the risk assessment and now have become de facto one-handed. So a really big one, I think, is go back through your risk assessments for places where it is not obvious that it's a 2-person job, and just double check you haven't missed any of those. So that's the second of the new places. Can I have my third one, Nicole? Lovely. Pretty much explained this one already, but I think you might have spaces which are typically more heavily occupied, but they might just be single occupancy offices. They might be the last person locking up at night, which probably always pre-existed COVID. But things like labs and server rooms, again, if you're working with a skeleton crew in some of those areas, you might have a space which suddenly has become lone work activities because there's only one person that's in there. So again, go back through your risk assessments, figure out what the story looks like. If it's going to be a short-term thing, formalize what your story looks like. Make sure that your internal comms deals with those things. If it's going to be a longer-term thing, you probably have to move your risk assessment story pretty quickly to that. And the last one, Nicole, is this. I mean, you can read that quicker than I can share it with you, but all the things that up until now provide either overt supervision or just the chance to mentor, to grow, to lead somebody, like sharing a car journey with somebody, the coffee break, might all be suspended. And the question of how you replicate the contact remotely is one that many people on this call, I'm sure, will have already had to deal with. But again, I think if your risk systems are predicated on close supervision, so if you spot somebody doing the wrong thing, then the question has to be how are you replicating that stuff right now? It has a second leg to it, of course, which is I'm going to speculate that many of the people on this call have been through that point in their career where they learned from the people around them. Early in my career, I shared an office with Nigel, and a number of my traits, I hope, are the best ones that I saw him have. And some of my traits are the exact opposite of the ones that I couldn't abide. And I'm sure he's learned some things off me over the intervening period. But we've got a generation coming through right now. If you've got new starters coming through right now, you're potentially going to miss some of that soft stuff about actually what does a phone call sound like? How do you deal with an angry member of the public or an angry caller? Even down to non-safety stuff like not fiddling your expenses or keeping your workspace tidy or something that's like that. And I do worry a little bit that in all of the discussion about lone worker safety, actually what we're going to lose is the capacity for people to be well mentored through this really quite critical period. It's possible, of course, that that's just a dinosaur. That actually what happens is that the poor behaviours, the poor habits that we might have just simply wither on the vine because there's no one to copy them and replicate them. I don't know, I guess we'll wait and see. So those are the four elements that we had. Can you give me the next one, Nicole? I think there's always a danger of this session being here, is I think Jane in particular talked very well about some of the elements about her out and about workers, and in particular some of the dreadful things about spitting and members of the public being threatening. But clearly, COVID risk management at the local level matters, and much of what I know that Worthwhile do is making sure that people have the tools to be able to figure out how to respond well in those kind of conditions. And so again, maybe it's not a risk assessment, but it is in your internal comms, making sure that people know exactly what's expected of them, and it's important for them to withdraw. I think, Nicole, there was one question you wanted us to answer. Was that? No, that we've done it, haven't we? I think the one. I'm going to do the Nicole, you're on mute.
Well, and I have no idea why it's doing that again. I'm so sorry. I think there's something that I'm pressing that means that it's jumping backwards and forwards, and I have no idea what it is. I have got some questions here, actually, Matt. I don't know whether you want to take these now, that the pair of you. There's a couple here.
Left room for Nigel to answer them, which is even better.
Amazing. So this is an interesting one that came in from somebody previously, which is about COVID-19. Seems to have taken over the management focus. Do you see this as a challenge when it comes to managing risks? I guess what they're saying is if we focus so much on the COVID-19 story, are we then forgetting about other bits of risks that should still be on the radar?
Absolutely. I mean, I couldn't agree more. So we're engaged in a large audit program now where we've been asked to look at the management of COVID risk. And I'm absolutely saying, other risks are definitely in the scope of the audit. I don't want to be going into a building auditing it for COVID compliance and ignoring the bolted shut fire doors or the kind of like the massive failure to manage Legionella. And I do think that there is a danger that the routine management of health and safety risk, which are quite big ticket risks sometimes around, inspection of lifts, Legionella, fire, etc., just gets dissed and dropped, and everybody's going, "Oh, it's not that important." I mean, realistically, the last thing you want is to be managing COVID-19 as a building's burning down.
Yeah.
So I think it's a really good question. I think it's a big danger, and one that I'm actively pushing against when I'm writing a scope in terms of reference.
I think two things to add to that. Well, I think Jane may also have added something about the co-ops experience. Our advice to organisations through the summer was to at least keep track of the things they weren't doing. So if you've not occupied a building, the lift maintenance and the water systems and all of those things matter. The other one is, I think, safety practice. Every safety practitioner I know, and there'll be some on this call, have been incredibly busy this summer, and it's been actually quite fun, I think. But very little of what we've done has been safety.
So here's another question. It's linked kind of against sort of control measures, but it's about training. So this is somebody that's saying that they're unable to do first aid training or manual handling training because of COVID-19 regulation or restrictions. So is this okay? Do they get a kind of get out for jail for free card from the HSE on this one?
No, they don't.
First aid had a period of grace as far as I know, and I think it extended. Nigel might know this better than me. I think it extended through to the 31st of, are there 31 days in September?
30 days in September, yeah. So it is. There is no more a get out of jail free card. I would envisage things like first aid and manual handling. Reasonable adjustments would be actually doing something virtually. I mean, the issue here is if you're a first aid and your first aid has gone out of ticket, there are people like St John's who are offering virtual training which allows you to do stuff, and your period of grace has gone. Manual handling, again, if you believe that risk assessments indicate manual handling training is required, you need to put in place something. Now, what you might decide is it's not optimal, it's suboptimal, but just ignoring it is, again, the HSE have very much said this is not in the within the realms now of what they would view as tolerable.
Yeah, I mean, I must admit, we've been kind of doing that with our clients at the moment, because obviously the conflict management training that we do is normally hands-on and face-to-face and drama-based. We can't do that, so we're having to do virtual training, but we're saying this is in the meantime training. This should never substitute the full training that you've identified they need. You've got to at some point kind of look at how you reinstate that, but this for now is kind of what you're doing because of the control measures that you need to put in. So it is a challenging one, isn't it? This is an interesting one, and yeah, I read it and I thought, I'm not actually quite sure of the answer to this one. So this is about working from home, and it's about other risks that the changes in the way that people work might bring. And the question is around, are domestic accidents and incidents, including kettles, falling downstairs, and even domestic violence, something that should be risk assessed? And I read that and I thought, that's actually a really interesting question.
So in my view, it depends is the answer, Nicole. Almost certainly those three, probably not, but there will be other ones. It seems to me that what we're interested in is if the guiding mind is work, if there is an incident because of something that the guiding mind has asked you to do at home, then definitely in. So you might think things like electrical safety from your office equipment. You might think slips, trips and falls from the stuff that you've got. But if you basically fall down your own stairs or you burn your house down with your own faulty kettle, almost certainly it would be out of scope. I think you'd have to have a fairly convincing argument to say that an employer's duty of care extended to protecting you from domestic violence or from your own poor maintenance of your kettle. However, Matt, what do you think?
Yeah, it would be easy to answer 7 or 8 months ago. I think irrespective of whether it's a legal duty,
Yeah.
particularly with regard to the threat of domestic violence, I think as an employer you probably have an interest in that works, and you may even be an unexpected recipient of that as a piece of information. It's not something you'd normally deal with. As for whether you've got a duty for it, it would be difficult, I think, to find.
Well,
I guess the difference is whether we're talking about a legal duty or a moral duty, isn't it?
So yes,
it's a difficult one. I mean, I guess that, you have to remember that there are some people that will come to work to get away from a home environment.
Sure.
And if now we're turning around saying there isn't an office for you anymore, you have to work from home, there is an impact on that. And I agree with you that I'm not sure that comes under kind of health and safety and legal requirements, but certainly from a moral point of view and just from a business point of view, I'd want to be managing that somehow, but it's a massive one, isn't it?
Well, from the answer would be, I think if you take away the design of your house and the use of electrical equipment, I think all reasonable sized employers ought to offer an employee assistance program. And basically what you should be doing is making sure that all of your staff have access to an effective EAP and to get that sort of advice. Now, I know of all the organizations I work for, I don't know of any organization that doesn't have an EAP that covers non-work related issues. So every EAP I know of is absolutely designed for both work and non-work, and indeed for people within the family. So it's not just for the worker, it's also for their immediate family and typically their children, though it tends to be children over 16 and under 22. So there is absolutely an idea that says, Nicole, maybe you push people towards the EAP. I'm fairly from a legal perspective, I'm fairly sure causation and duty of care would be incredibly hard, but I completely agree that from a kind of a moral perspective, and certainly I've seen, so I'm working with one organization that has that's using a mindfulness app. Now, I was originally skeptical, but I'm really impressed by it. They're using a mindfulness app and they're linking it to the EAP, and what they're driving is they're driving the EAP usage up hugely. So they've gone from less than 1% to almost 10%, and I think that's by being incredibly proactive. So one of my top tips to any organization is, if you have concerns like Nicole's, first of all, it would make sense to know that your house is electrically safe and you haven't got stupid trip hazards, non-work related. But secondly, if you've got those concerns, actually accessing your EAP and using it in a really proactive way is not a bad thing to do.
And I would suggest that kind of caring employers should have some kind of domestic abuse policy, or not necessarily a policy, but an assistance program, or at least an awareness of, and whether that comes through mental health or whatever. But it's interesting. It kind of links in actually just to one last question we've got here, which is about the management of stress. It's all been about reducing exposures to work-related stressors. And then the question is, do you think that there are new stresses when people are either working alone or coming back to work alone? So, I guess that kind of links to that question, doesn't it?
So my observation is this: if you, almost all stress cases and almost all stress management initiatives are around the HSC's kind of 6 stressors, and they all tend to be about work and avoiding people from becoming stressed out, whatever that means. I think for the first time, we're seeing mass evidence of not burnout, but rust out, where people actually have been understimulated, have been underutilized. And we're seeing quite interesting behavioral changes. I'm training people who are coming back to the workplace, and they're slightly agoraphobic. They're slightly worried about that. And as a lone worker, by yourself on a public transport for the first time in 6 months, or even really dumb stuff like you've forgotten what your password is. You've forgotten where the sort of the stuff that you need to work is. I mean, as Matt said, I have been fairly remiss in going to our office. We have a PIN code to get into our office, first time I went there, I wasn't sure I could remember it. Fortunately, I did. But then when I had to set the alarm, I actually cocked up, and it was really stiff buttons because I hadn't been used for ages. And I slight panic. I thought, oh my God, I'm going to get the G4S out on me.
See, but
And
that's got a real link though, Nigel, because I talked about that in my in the first session about this idea of skills fade. Now, say you've got a lone worker who's out and about, the skills in terms of actually dealing with the public, because I don't know about you, I've become certainly less tolerant since March. So my level of kind of patience, if I'm talking to somebody, might be different. But also, if I had to use, for example, my lone worker device to raise the alarm, unless somebody had actually gone through it again with me at that point, I'm not sure I'd remember how to do it. So your example of the pin is a really good one.
Absolutely. I mean, the one thing I have with Matt, though, is I know that he hasn't got less tolerant when he's about, because his tolerance was so intolerant anyway. So I'm sure that
on that subject, and with 12 seconds to go, two things. Rebecca Lowry very helpfully
yes, thank you, Rebecca.
typed to us the answer about first aid at work and emergency first aid at work. And she's saying certificates expired after 16th of March, remain valid until 31st of October, so I was a month out, or 6 months from the date of expiry. That's really helpful. And requalification by 31st of March. Yes, that was the only one I wanted to tag in there.
Yeah. No, that's brilliant.
Actual fact rather than my guesswork.
Yeah, no, that's good. There was somebody else, an anonymous attendee, who put that their organisation are actually assisting those people who are struggling to work at home because of issues like domestic violence, or it could be that you have a family member that, for some reason it makes it difficult to work at home, are being supported to be able to return to the office to be able to work. So I think that's a positive.
I know Layla's going to talk about it next up.
Yeah.
I have to say, ideal workplaces should have domestic violence and or sexual violence policies. I have to say, I feel very comfortable that human applications doesn't.
Yeah.
I mean, genuinely, and I hope
I know what you're saying.
So it'd be interesting when Leia's talking to whether or not it matters the nature of the organisation or not. I'm conscious that wasn't something everybody else could see.
Yeah.
But it fits in, I think, with our story about what you should review, what policies you should have. So I hope that's been helpful.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, guys. That's really helpful. As always, good value from you guys. And I'm sure there may be some more questions that come in after you've left us today. If that's the case, are you happy for us to ping them over to you in an email and we'll answer those through the website?
Yeah, send them to me.
Fantastic.
Nigel's too busy.
What?
Okay, thanks, guys. Really good to see you.
Bye.
Kristen, I'm going to hand back to you.
All righty then. Hello, everybody. We're back with our next speaker. This is Layla Okai. She's from Diverse Minds UK Limited, and she's talking about remote, not distance, mental health and well-being considerations for long-term lone workers and those who manage them. Layla's the founder of Diverse Minds, which creates happy, equal, and mentally healthy workplaces through training, coaching, and consultancy. She's over 17 years of experience in developing and implementing diversity, inclusion, and equality practices with senior leadership teams. And today, I'm hoping she's going to talk about how to manage you and your teams working from home, like the home life balance and remote working. How do you spot the signs of mental ill health from a distance, of course, and some ways to be proactive in managing mental health well-being when working remotely. So, hello, Layla, welcome, and over to you, hopefully.
Thank you so much. Thank you, and thanks for letting me move my own slides on as well. I do appreciate that because I know I'm the only panelist who's sharing my screen. Okay, so we're going to have a conversation about staying connected whilst working at home. I'm just going to really quickly frame what well-being is. I think we do know, but I think sometimes it's helpful to do that. Positive communication at a distance, what does that look like? What you might need to do to stay connected and to come away with some actions or start to think about actions to help you keep going. And I'm also going to talk about introvert and extrovert preferences a little bit as well. So I can see the chat coming in. I'm not always the best at picking up the chat speedily. So Kristen, if you want to interrupt me at any point, please feel free. Okay, so what is well-being? So in essence, what I say is well-being is an umbrella, and it's how you manage your day-to-day life and how you're feeling on a given day. And of course, it incorporates physical and mental health to create this overall picture of being well. And it's how we manage ourselves, all of the different types of relationships that we have in our life, and be able to participate in life that in the way that we wish to. And of course, if our well-being isn't optimum, we can't do these things necessarily in the way that we might do when our well-being is at its highest level or a good level, or where we want it to be. And we know that well-being is influenced by the environment we work in. Really interesting discussions there just about safety. I thought that question about slips and trips, and if your kettle does something, is the workplace liable? And as a result, it will change like mental health does. And so within that, mental health, we all have it. I think we still have, often people referring to mental health when they're talking about mental ill health. But mental health, like we have physical health, is our psychological and emotional well-being. It will then impact on how we think, feel, and act, make choices, do things, how we handle that stress. And it impacts on our self-esteem, how we see ourselves and we see others. And going back to that point about relationships, it enables us to create, form, and sustain, I think, particularly during this period, it's been so important to sustain all these different relationships: work colleagues, managers, romantic relationships, family, siblings, younger dependents, older dependents, etc. And they're all going to be different. And of course, our mental health and well-being will shape that. And fluctuations, completely normal, understandable. Everyone has different threshold triggers and stress points. And I don't know about you, but it's unlikely that for the whole entirety of our life, we wake up feeling 100% mentally optimum, 100% with our well-being and ready to go. Because there's certain things that aren't in our control that make this more challenging. And changes, unexpected changes in particular. You hear a lot, don't we, that it's very difficult for humans to adapt, or sorry, we can adapt, but unexpected changes really throw us off course. And actually, as a whole, as a species, we're maybe not as adaptable as we like to think. We do in the end, but we can get shocked quite easily. So all of these things that have happened, that people have talked about, and I don't know about you, but the last one for me, video call burnout, has been absolutely exhausting. And I found it really difficult. And even though I'm an extreme extrovert, I do find this constant video calls and the fact that people won't pick up the phone really frustrating. Along with the disruption to routine, not being able to travel, ambiguity, uncertainty, and working at home overnight. So for some people that might have, I saw from your poll that for some of you it hasn't changed, and people might be mainly working at home, there are pros and cons. But then how do we keep momentum going? And here's a little bit about adaptation cycle. So what might have happened and the different stages. Now, this is actually a framework used for when people move to a different country. So you've got your home country and your host country. But I thought, actually, this is very familiar to me in times that we've just over the last 6-7 months. So initially, maybe when lockdown was announced on March the 23rd, we had anxiety and relief. Oh, I think Nicole said I didn't have to get on a train. I go running in the morning. That's quite nice. But actually, how am I going to be able to do this? Is my internet stable? Then we've got the honeymoon stage. Oh, this is amazing. I'm loving it. I've got time. And then it's like, oh, sugar, this is going on for not just till June. This is going on for a long time. Process of adjustment. Then uncertainty, anxiety. So the things that have been mentioned. How do I go to the office? What do I do? Will I remember my password? Will I remember the buttons? How do I set the alarm? And then integration. Now, of course, it doesn't have to be a linear stage. And actually, many of us might have gotten to integration and we might be back at stage 1 again with everything that's happened with the tier 1, 2, and 3. We don't have a decision over that. The government decides, particularly with universities. I do lots of work with universities. This has been very, very stressful for staff, academic, professional services, students, parents, etc. So this is all happening. It's not linear. You could also relate it to the Kubler-Ross curve. There's bits that are similar there as well. And so our balance has really been pushed to the limit. There's very little separation between professional and personal. And so how can we really create balance when there's a challenge to demarcate space? Those of you who've got dedicated office space and sizable houses, I'm very envious, but also it's the time and the emotional energy. And we were talking about the point about the domestic and sexual violence policies. And I suppose my point there is that, we don't realize who might be experiencing what. And domestic domestic violence is often at the hands of a partner. We might think of it as a male partner towards a female partner, but I think we can also think about it, you know, people that live with in-laws and extended families. There's a lot more to it than that, and also specifically sexual violence. What we've seen as well, and I'm just thinking in terms of health and safety and mental health, is that many, and it tends to be women. So one of my neighbours is a psychiatrist, and most of the cases he's seeing are historical sexual violence or sexual abuse cases that have come to the front. Now, of course, this is then really challenging to talk about, I think, for many people, not everyone, in a work environment. And so how do people get the help when mental health services are so jam-packed? It feels quite delicate and vulnerable, and people aren't trained to talk about it in the workplace. And I don't think policies are the panacea, but at least if we're prepared and we know and we've got ways in which we can support people, that can be really useful. So I thought I'd pick that up there. And then we've got this thing called resilience, haven't we? Oh, we need to be resilient. Now, of course, resilience is really important. But what I will say is that I think it's really essential that workplaces don't use resilience as a sticking plaster and say, oh, well, you need to be more resilient, because we don't know people's triggers. We don't know people's histories. We don't know what people have coped with before. And we also don't know that, you know, this has been quite new for many people. So the last big pandemic, you could talk about SARS, that would have impacted people, but if we think about 1918, most people weren't alive then. So resilience is really about how we respond positively, but there does need to be systemic support. It isn't just about sucking up negative behavior. So what I would say, it's like a rubber band, and we all have a rubber band, and our rubber band needs to be a shape, a particular shape, in order for our mental health and our overall well-being to be optimum. And when changes, these unexpected changes happen, our rubber band changes shape into a shape that's not the shape that we need it to be. So resilience is about what techniques do we have to move it into a shape that's going to be useful, helpful, and enable us to get our well-being back on track. So it's not about avoidance, it's not about not noticing when pressure appears, but what are the proactive things to manage those pressures? Also, it might be that our coping strategies that have worked for X number of years or months, suddenly they stop working, or they stop working in a way that we think, wait a second, I feel still really awful and I'm doing everything. Now, that doesn't mean we stop doing it, but it's almost to acknowledge, I am going to feel discomfort, I am going to feel that this is hard, but that actually, even if I remove those techniques that I'm using, I'm going to feel even worse. So that whole thing about providing lasting benefits for emotional health. And there are two parts, really. Resilient thought, so those are the thinking and belief systems. So reframing, gratitude, and, you know, previous speakers talked about mindfulness, and also the action. So what are the actions that we're going to take? Nutrition, rest, movement, and of course asking for support, which I think is much easier said than done, actually. And then this links to the emotional well-being at work. So this isn't about the absence of emotions. I've got to sit here and work on my own and be resilient and be happy with it. But to understand that and harness the possibility and the positivity in the workplace as a manager, but also as a colleague, to support others in their emotional well-being journey. So I don't know, there's a post doing the rounds on LinkedIn at the moment about a CEO of a charitable organization. She said, I cried on a Zoom call, and initially I felt really embarrassed, but then everyone, there were 6 CEOs, everyone said, we're not coping, we're really struggling, we've really been trying to keep our organization afloat. And even though they might not be lone working in the traditional sense, they're carrying this leadership burden, and having that conversation was a game changer. So it's all those things about identifying, building upon, and operating from your strengths, rather than fixating on weaknesses. I mean, sometimes we do have to fixate or focus on problems, but it's that the more equipped you are to understand your emotions, what are they trying to tell you, the greater the capacity to cope with stress in terms of what strategies do I need, and focus on important priorities, personal priorities. And so communication then, what do you think are the biggest challenges in relation to communicating remotely as a team? So you might have become a lone worker, or you're a lone worker, but you're still part of some kind of wider team. But also thinking about what is your preferred communication style. And I don't know about you, but I've been reading lots of articles about, you know, couples where one's an extrovert and one's an introvert, and the introverts are like, oh God, get me away from my partner, I'm exhausted, stop talking to me. And extroverts are like these puppy dogs saying, talk to me, be my be my colleague, and how, you know, how this plays into it. So we know what happens, don't we? So extrovert preferences generally tend to gain their energy from being around people, talking through things, maybe more open about talking about how they're feeling. And we also know that people aren't binary. So this is overarching, big picture stuff, generally more socially outgoing, but also that these video calls have caused burnout, so people don't want to necessarily be social online, prefer face-to-face communication or the phone, prefer to get verbal input on things, whereas our introvert preferences, the likelihood is they want to think things through. They're more likely to speak about their feelings when they know people well. They may be happier to stay in the background, preferring email or chat communication, online chat. So that for some people has been brilliant. They've absolutely loved it and they've thrived, and prefer one-to-one verbal input on things necessary more over, group input. And so this is a model that I'm trained in called TetraMap, and it's all about the nature of communication. And in essence, this is what happens where you've got someone who has a high earth preference. They like to get things done as efficiently as possible and quickly. What's the return on investment? Let's go, 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 get it done. Then someone with a high air preference, well, they like all the information, the data, the qualitative, the quantitative for clarity, so they can make the decision that works for them. High water likes to collaborate and likes to make sure that there's empathy and harmony between people. And high fire likes innovation and to find new ways of doing things. And most of us have two of these preferences. But of course, if you've got someone who's a high water preference and likes to have a lovely chat before a meeting, rightly so, then you've got someone who's a high earth preference rolling their eyes thinking, flipping heck, can we just get this done? It becomes difficult, doesn't it? Again, someone likes to innovate. Well, let's look at this as an opportunity. Yeah, we're working at home, we can come up with new systems. Whoa, 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 whoa. High air preference is going, let's check, let's see the reviews. How do we know this is going to work? We need time for rollout. And so you can see all these different challenges that happen, but it isn't always, it's kind of implicit, not explicit. So how are we talking about this to create the kind of remote yet not distant way that we understand each other, that we're working? And even if we're lone working in terms of the fact we might be solopreneurs, what about our customers and our clients? So different styles can cause tension if we don't understand those preferences, or how we might make intelligent guesses or assumptions. I mean, there's obviously a lot more to it than that. I've just given you a snapshot, but how that will work and help. And also boundaries. So this is really, really important. So being assertive, and again, how do we like to be assertive and how that impacts on our mental health and well-being in relation to how we're communicating and how we're working. And of course, we know it doesn't always mean that you get what you want, but that you respect yourself and the other person, and it sets a standard for professionalism and or the usual, as my friends are calling it. So the new usual, and it's about acknowledging that other person's needs. And how do you do that in a remote way? So in face-to-face communication, we've got the good eye contact, the even tone, open body language. It's very difficult to interpret body language online, and that's part of the reason we find it quite exhausting. But non-judgmental language, we can still use that. We might even be able to have more time and space to plan the time and the place and think about, how do I want to communicate these boundaries and how am I going to be heard? Because although some people, it was interesting hearing from Matt and Chris about the, what was the term I think they used? Was it rustification? How people's skills aren't being used, but also that things aren't being done in a necessarily time efficient way, and that people have less time to do work. So we're all working at weekends, or lots of people are, or all the meetings are happening in the day, and then come 5 o'clock, having some time with the family to have dinner and then straight back onto the laptop. So this is tricky, and it looks different. And there's also the psychological contract that we know is omnipresent. So staying connected as a team. So just some questions then for you to reflect on. What's worked well so far? What are the different ways that make you feel connected? And what will make you feel more like a team when working remotely? So you might not be an official team, but who is your team? Who is in your wider team? As a lone worker, there'll still be people that you connect with and work with. And then time pressures. So this goes back to efficiencies and thinking about what's draining your energy and time. Now, it might be things that you can plug, it might be things you can't plug, but also, are there tasks that you really resent doing that add to your mental load? Now, this could be professionally or personally. And is there anything that you can delegate in the home and or workspace difficult when you're not allowed people in your home, or if they're people shielding? This isn't necessarily straightforward. But, you know, are there roles that are up for negotiation? So you can think about, you know, my time is a really precious asset. Are there ways that you can manage tasks and technology at your fingertips via apps, or, you know, project management tools? I don't know how you feel, but, you know, people talk about Asana, about Trello, ClickUp, Monday. There are lots, aren't there? Could they make your life easier? Could it be that the capital investment would make it work? I don't know, but they're things to think about your well-being, because if it's draining your time and energy and you feel resentful, then thinking about your optimum well-being, that's going to become increasingly more difficult. And, you know, how do you want to connect with people and when? And thinking about, you know, what is your daily routine and how this can help your well-being and give you some sense of structure. And interestingly, you might think, well, structure sounds really annoying. It sounds like, oh, crikey, something else to add to my to-do list. But what I would say, it's not making yourself a long list of things to do, but what are the top things that could be really useful for you? So how do you want to connect with people and when? Are there things like mindfulness, gentle exercise, yoga, stretching that you can do throughout the day? Just 5 minutes, get up, walk around the room, put a tune on, dance like no one's looking. We have a to-do list, but what about a have-done list at the end of the day to reflect on your achievements? Simple things like the Pomodoro technique. So 25 minutes and then a short break, 52 minutes and a 17-minute break, for example. How can you create any kind of small space? I've got a friend at the moment, she's using some space in her corridor, she's painted it, she's ordered a desk that fits, and she's putting a screen round her. Now, we can't always afford to do that, but is there something that you can do to separate your work area from your personal area? Getting fresh air, considering your social media use. I'm not going to tell anyone what to do, but what helps you? Again, think about your exhaustion, your energy levels. How's that going to help? If it helps you feel connected, brilliant. But if it's sucking up your time and energy, you might want to rethink your strategy. Thinking about emotional well-being. How are you checking in? Learning new things, so small things. It could be in your work, it could be in your personal life, it could be cooking a new recipe, it could be doing a bit of DIY, whatever it is. Thinking about our resilient thoughts, our gratitude every day, and enjoying those small moments, just those small quiet moments that we have. Caring for plants, nurturing plants, seeing them grow and nurturing them. Decluttering your space. If you want to do Marie Kondo, knock yourself out, but I'm thinking more, oh, I've got some old pens that really need throwing away. That's decluttering your space. Get creative in any way. That could be doodling, that could be gardening, that could be doing your pot plants, that could be, it's not just about being amazing at art, but if that works for you, brilliant. Reading a chapter of a book and writing down some reflections, volunteering and donating and looking after others, not to the detriment of yourself, but that is actually very helpful for our well-being. Or thinking about, how do I want to maybe do this differently, looking after others, or including boundaries, including setting home work-life standards, anything at all. And then this is a tool from RAW, which is the wellbeing and resilience at work psychometric tool. Again, something I'm trained in, and just to illustrate that this is the Wellbeing Project's IP, but I am licensed to use it. So in essence, going back to our energy levels, thinking about which activities put us in the different zones. So think about, if we start in the red zone, what are the things that make you feel annoyed, angry, short-tempered and stressed, irritable? And we will need to spend some time here. We don't want to spend a huge amount of time here, but think about the activities that put you in that zone, and then think about, okay, you might then think, right, I need to recover. So in order to recover, you move into the grey zone. And it isn't always linear, but I'm just going round the mood map to show you. So then let's say, for me, I'll use myself as an example. I'm exhausted with the video calls. I'm sick of clients asking me things, or I'm tired of answering the same question over and over again. Then I get exhausted and anxious and distracted and overwhelmed. And oh my goodness, what do I do? How do I manage this? I don't have the systems. Do I have the money to pay for it? Then I just need to take a step back. Then I kind of move into the yellow zone. Okay, so I'm going to go into my garden and chop the last bits of my mint heads and lavender for my, I'm going to dry them out, and so I've got my winter tea, for example, and that really helps me. I'm going to read a book. I'm going to do something, and then the next day I think, right, okay, I'm ready. I'm going to get ready for the green zone. I know how I'm going to tackle that difficult person, or how I'm going to be able to motivate myself, because maybe I don't have that team around me at the moment. They're not, we're not in the office. So how I do that. So how you might like to think about different activities and how they feed you or deplete you or put you in that zone. So it's sort of 15% on the left hand side, the grey and the red zones, and 85% on the green and the yellow zones. And also, I know that this isn't an immediate thing. It's not about snapping our fingers and suddenly everything's wonderful. Wouldn't it be amazing if I just shared these tips with you and we could put them all into action, and we'll go back and forth. But it's just about realizing, what are my triggers? What are my breaking points? Who's on my support network? Who can I talk to? And don't think about this as adding to your workload. So identifying things that you want to do step by step. And I always say, you are the CEO of your own life. So who's on your board to support you, to help you on your journey, and you don't feel that you have to do it alone. And so, we can pick these up in the questions maybe, but what actions appeal to you? What do you think may help your well-being the most? And actually, what action or actions are you committed to take after the whole of this conference and webinar that's just going to help you? It could be something really small, but small things can often make very big impacts, as we know. And so just want to say thank you so much for participating. It's time for questions. I'll stop sharing my screen. And yes, and I think I've missed some of the chat. So do let me know what I've missed, Kristen.
That's been great, Layla. Thank you so much. I think you've given us a ton of both, a good overview of what goes into well-being, what are the negative stressors, and what are the positive things we can do to kind of build up our resilience, but also understand how our well-being is created and sustained by things that we do. There's been questions. I know there was an initial question back at the beginning of the day. How would you advise some employee, what would you suggest they do if they raise isolation and well-being concerns while they're working at home to their manager, and they don't feel that they're being heard, that maybe they're being ignored by that?
It's a really tricky one, isn't it? Because this, I guess my presentation assumes that you've got a positive relationship, that your organisation are willing to listen. And the sad truth of it is there are lots of organisations that aren't necessarily willing to listen. So one of the things, I think you can do is there will be policies and procedures, and using those and say, you know what, this is what it says in our policy, to really make sure that you're okay with them, and that actually I've seen this and it'd be really, I think it's really important that I have this, or that, I've seen that this is in the policy. Is there a reason why this isn't being implemented right now? So I think that's one way. I think if you can flag that there's going to be a risk, using risk assessments. So often someone might not listen, but you could say, you know what, as per our policies, or as per health and safety law, it's really important that I have a risk assessment, because actually I'm really concerned, and the last thing I would want is for the organisation to be put into disrepute. So we don't want to have to go down those routes, but sometimes we have to. Also, as a manager, it can be a case of having to ask twice. So you want to have the conversation with your member of staff, but you feel they're not really forthcoming. Maybe they feel that I'm spying on them as opposed to caring for them. And it's just to try and say, actually, before we go to our agenda, I just wanted to check in, how are you? And maybe you want to tell them a little bit about you, like, actually, are the video calls getting to you? Or do you feel that after 5 o'clock you have to get back on your laptop? I'm feeling that way too, and I'm really thinking about strategies that help me. How about you? And just trying to build and just keep asking and say, right, actually, in our stand-up meetings or whatever mechanisms you have, we're just going to check in with everyone. How are you doing? The other tool that I didn't share is the performance pressure curve. So many of you will be familiar with that. Again, about, are people's skills being used enough? Are they in boredom? Are they in stretch? Are they in strain? Are they in crisis? Now, people might not.
Or are they in rust?
Yeah, are they in rust?
Go ahead, sorry.
No, it's true. They might not want to obviously declare or disclose that, but as a team, you could say, where's the project putting us? And then that takes the emphasis off individuals. And actually people say, oh, I'm really in strain because, the system's not working. This client keeps phoning me. All right, so what as a team can we do to manage this? And to just keep having those conversations?
We did have a question. You've just hit on some of them. What are the skills? How do we give those skills to managers to manage these issues remotely? It's another level of complexity for them. And I like your idea of talking again, starting conversations, trying to build that rapport, even though you're 2 dimensions rather than 3.
Well, we've been talking a lot about this in mental health first aid training, and one of the things is to say, right, okay, it sounds really simple. Are you comfortable? Am I comfortable? Like, how do we want to have this conversation? Are you sitting somewhere comfortable, somewhere quiet, somewhere private? Do you have a, are you warm enough? Do you have a drink? Should we take a break? Do you want to have 5 minutes to get a drink? We'll reconvene. Also, just to say, look, are you more comfortable on the phone? Do you want to keep video? I mean, I'd find it helpful to keep video on. Do you want to keep video on, or should we keep it on for 10 minutes and then if you feel more comfortable switching it off, we can do that. And I guess it's about what's in our gift, even though we're in this screen world and we're kind of living on a bit like a game show, really. Or to say, okay, are you okay to talk now? Do you want to start the conversation and pick it up another time? Or when would you like to do that? So I think it's those small things.
You're offering people kind of to take control of it in a way. You're providing multiple ways for them to enter the conversation, and you're providing ways to kind of ask them if they'd like to come again, or come to you again. So there's this openness there. What do you do? How do we keep this going over time? I mean, when our best intentions maybe fade, or when I guess it's just a constant little and often, would you say, kind of trying to build up those good habits and do the things we need to do to keep ourselves as well and happy as we can be.
I think sometimes people really fear, don't they? They fear saying the wrong thing. And I think, what, we all will make mistakes and we'll all say things that might be a bit clumsy, but it's the spirit behind it. So if I say to you, Kristen, oh, you don't seem quite yourself, are you okay? And you went, what do you mean I don't seem quite myself? I'm fine. But that my intention, I just say, okay, I'm so sorry, that wasn't the way it's intended. But you know what, whenever you're ready to talk, if you ever want to talk, I'm here to listen. And you will also be able to maybe read your staff a bit better, and also that you've just got to keep going, and if it goes wrong the first time, what is it that went wrong? Reflecting on that. Are there ways in which the question could be asked differently? So I always say, can you flip why questions, which even though the intent not may be judgmental, but flip them to what questions. So why did you do that? To what made you do that? Or what were the things that led to that decision? It's much more open to have that conversation, isn't it? But it does take practice. So I think coaching skills in the workplace, remembering that it's not just a snap your fingers and done. You've got to keep going, and it might feel uncomfortable, those new ways of working or talking or speaking, but what are the tools out there that will help you to do that?
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. I think you gave us a huge amount to consider, and really appreciate the kind of focused ideas for people to take away. So that's great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can I remind everybody that we are now moving into the last part of the day, which is our wonderful panel, and it's about technology issues. But please, at any point, put into the question box your questions, because the panel is here. We've got 4 people anyway to answer your questions. So now's your opportunity. I'm going to hand over back to Nicole, if you're there, Nicole, and we'll go onward to, can technology play a part in this new way of working?
Hi, Kristen. Thank you for that. Thank you, Layla. I had a horrible moment halfway through your session when I thought my camera was still on, because I was stood up doing my stretches, and I suddenly thought, oh, my camera's on, and I am dancing, and I was hoping nobody was looking, but there you go. So thank you for that, Layla. That was great. So questions for the panel. We've got a few that have come in already, but before we actually pose questions to the panel, I'd like to pose a question to everybody out there. So I'm going to launch another poll, and this is about technology. And do you know what? Just for Matt Trigg, I'm going to allow panelists to vote this time. So the question is, do you use technology as part of your lone worker risk management? And there are several answers there that you can choose. Yes, well embedded systems. Yes, to some degree. Done so in the past, maybe not at the moment. Maybe you're looking at exploring the possibilities, or maybe the risks that you run you don't feel actually would help you at all. Or maybe you don't know, maybe you're the wrong person that we're asking that question to. So we shall see. So hopefully we should have Chris, Craig and Alicia online. I can see Chris and I can see Craig at the moment. Alicia, are you there? Fantastic, she's there as well. So we'll just give this another minute or two, because I think this is quite interesting for you guys as well to see the answers to this. Let's just give everybody a second or two. We've still got over 120 attendees on the line, so it takes a minute or two for everybody to click. And again, I know that some of you can't do this, so apologies for this one. But let's have a little look at it. I hope everybody's been enjoying the afternoon session and taken away some information that they found useful to them. We've had some really lovely bits of feedback coming through in the Q&A boxes as well. So Louise has been handling those fantastically. Thank you, Lou. But thank you everybody for putting in your views and opinions as well. And so don't forget to tweet about us, hashtag LWSL 2020. There you go, I almost got that wrong. So just to keep us alive on social media as well, that would be great. Okay, let's have a look and see what people think. So share these results with you so that you can see. So overwhelmingly, yes, to some degree. And I suppose we should have put another one on there that said, to what degree? And then how much, and everything else that goes with that question. So, but that's quite interesting. It's quite a lot of people have got well embedded systems, so that's useful. 4% said no, it wouldn't help, and 7% of you out there don't know. So maybe that's a question to go away and ask over today, after today, if that's useful to you. That might be useful to our panel just to give them a bit of overview before we start. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Craig, Alicia and Chris, and I'm actually going to ask them to do their own introductions so that we've got a better view of them and not of the slides. I'm going to get rid of the slides for now because we don't need to see that. It'd just be nice to see them. So guys, let's start with Craig, because you just happen to be first in my line. So Craig, can you just give us a quick overview? Who are you? Why are you here?
Okay, hi Nicole, hi everyone. I'm Craig, and I've been involved in lone worker technology going on for 20 years now, so that's my interest. It's become my passion for the last 20 years, so that's why I'm here. Fantastic.
I remember the first time we met actually, Craig, at a conference in Northern Ireland where you accosted me after my session. I don't know if that's the right word, but you know. Brilliant. Thanks, Craig. Alicia, let's go to you next.
Hi, everyone. I'm Alicia. I'm the Sales and Operations Director at First to Help You. I've been in the lone worker industry now for about 10 years and worked with Nicole for many of those years. So that's why I'm here.
Fantastic. You're also the Vice Chair, have I got this right? Vice Chair of the Lone Worker section of the BSIA, to give you your feedback.
I am indeed. Thank you for that.
Good to see you, Alicia. Good. And finally, Chris.
Afternoon, Nicole. Good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, I kind of straddle the two, really, Craig and Alicia. I've been in it for about 15 years. So a few years sort of developing, deploying solutions, working with customers, working with partners on the technology front. Yeah, real passion for it. So that's why I'm here today.
Fantastic. So the organisations that you will represent this afternoon, Vismo, First to Help You and Reliance Protect, are also all exhibitors at Lone Worker Safety Live next October. And we were saying yesterday when we were doing the kind of tech run through for this, how strange it is that today we should have all been in London unpacking our goods and greeting and meeting and chatting with people. And it does seem a bit strange because we know there's over 120 people out there. We just don't know what they're thinking or what they're saying at the moment. But anyway, there you go. So lovely to have you here. So panel discussion, we put this idea together of how technology can play a part in this new way of working, because technology is certainly, I think, nowadays something that people are adopting as a way of controlling some of the risks, or at least as a response to some of the risks that are out there for lone workers. And I just thought a nice way to kind of get this started, or get the conversation started, is to get each of you just to give me a very brief overview of how you believe technology can assist companies managing lone working in today's COVID world. So what do you see as kind of some of the highlights of this? And can we start backwards this time and go to maybe Chris first? So Chris, just a quick overview from you.
Sure. I think some of the basics are in play regardless of COVID. And when I go back to the basics and I think about sort of those mobile field-based lone workers rather than home-based, it's some of those answering those basic questions, or helping technology answer some of the basic questions around where are staff, what tasks are they doing, has a risk assessment's been done for those staff, and how do you know they've got home safely or finished the task safely? Yeah. So you know, when we look at solutions, I think you've got smartphone apps, you've got bespoke devices, where people can raise alarms, get call assistance manually. They can raise alarms on behalf of the user. When you look at sort of incapacity, sort of looking for falls and non-movement in a sort of where you're looking at those environmental risks. And you can use timer-based events, so checking in and out. And one, as you know, Nicole, close to my heart, is that checking in and checking out at the end of the day. I think is one of the questions I saw on the Q&A was, how do you know staff have got back to base at the end of the day?
Yeah.
You can traditionally, what would you do? You'd maybe have a buddy system, or people would ring into a manager, perhaps, or a receptionist. You can set timers going and staff check out. If they don't check out, a provider like ourselves or anyone on the panel can be that response. So at a manager level, you take that burden away from them. I suppose you can then get more, you can get into sort of geo-fencing, where you're looking at location of that individual and sort of automate that almost, and have rules by exception. Chris Allcard hasn't gone back to base, and it's 5:10 and he should have been back by 5 o'clock. Therefore, you want an exception to come out either to the organisation or to your partner to follow that up. So I think those basics still apply, to be fair, whether that's COVID or not. I think the management of field-based staff has changed from that office and from that base to the home. So there's a risk of a disconnect there, or increased disconnect. And that's maybe where things like looking at the user status on a portal, using some of those tools on apps and devices come into play.
And I think, the question that we had was, how do we manage the HSE requirement of implementing, and the phrase is, a reliable system to ensure a lone worker has returned to their base once they've completed their task. With 250 field workers this attendee's got, whose base is their home, working different hours including standby, they're finding this quite challenging. And I think what we're hearing from our clients, it's not only challenging for kind of management and the health and safety teams, it's actually difficult for the managers, because they're also working from home, they're also doing flexible hours, etc. So it's not the same as it was previously, and they might not even have access to some of the systems. So maybe we can kind of think about that as well. Craig, let's go to you next if I can, just because on my screen you're next along, that's all. So Craig, can we come to you next?
Sure, yeah. No, I've always thought that technology on its own is not the answer. It has to form part of a wider set of measures, policy and process, and buy-in from stakeholders, from C-suite downwards, the managers that you just touched on there, and of course the users themselves. And I think there was a question placed about the applicability of technology, if you like, or this device I've been given doesn't quite work for me.
Yeah.
That problem ultimately, I think, can be solved to a great degree by making sure that all of the appropriate stakeholders are involved in the get-go in specifying the requirement. And any employer of workers should start by just drawing up their own list of, these are the things that a technology solution must do for us. These are the things that would be nice to haves.
Yeah.
And just don't deviate from that. Don't allow yourself to be unduly steered by one vendor or another, or one price or another, because that's often the challenge. Often the challenge if the procurement process is run by those who are principally interested in price and not deliverability or value, then there's a great risk that you will end up with something that might be cheap but isn't particularly effective.
Yeah, I like that idea. I mean, one of the things that we do with our clients when they ask us about, well, which system should we use, which we get asked all the time, because obviously we work with a lot of you guys through Lone Worker Safety Live. And I say to them, well, I can't tell you which system, but I can tell you the questions that you should be asking. And they're often about their own organisation, and they think we're going to give them a list of questions that they need to ask you guys. But actually, the list of questions is the things that they need to ask their loan workers and their managers and everything else that sort of sits within their field. So I think that's interesting. The actual question that you were referring to, Craig, there, it was somebody who was a fire risk assessor, and they said that they've got a system or a device that's not very user-friendly. They don't find it intuitive, and the reports show that other fire risk assessors don't use it as they should. However, there is a reluctance now that the investment has been made to retract this, even though it doesn't perform well. And I think that actually says exactly what you've just said, that potentially that kind of, the questions weren't asked at the beginning. And is that something that you find with your experiences, that businesses are struggling with that?
I think the key part in that question, as it was written, is the final part of the sentence where it says it does not perform as it was sold.
It was sold, yeah.
Then, the client involved there shouldn't feel embarrassed or that they can't go back to that vendor, and be clear that what they've now got is not what was sold to them.
Yeah.
Any vendor worth their salt would listen to those concerns and then do something about it. Otherwise, they're going to lose that client in a year or two's time, whatever it is.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Craig. Alicia, let's come to you. So, Craig, I'll come back to you in a second or two if that's okay. But let's get Alicia in on the conversation. So, my initial question was about how can technology help in this kind of COVID world, as it were? So, have you seen changes in the way that businesses are using the technology? Is there anything different that people are asking you now?
I think they've just adapted how they use the technology, so the use has continued. But we talked about, or one of the presenters earlier talked about the work-life balance.
Yeah.
So people are using the systems to try and get that work-life balance of kind of checking in their timer at the beginning of the day to say, I'm working from home today, because the employers still have the duty of care. So they'll log in and then they'll get the reminder that they should finish work at 5 o'clock, if that always happens. But the managers can then log on to the portals to check, okay, so they have finished work for the day, they're done. So they're still utilising the technology and the systems, but just slightly different to how they would had they been out on the road.
I like that idea that you said about that they will get a reminder that they should be finishing work, because I think we hear a lot from kind of end users that when they log in, they feel that this isn't about safety, this is about kind of time management and to make sure that I'm on the screen. I know, I've got some in my family that does a job where they have to go on a Zoom meeting every single morning, and they're convinced that is purely just to make sure that they're awake and not in their pajamas, But so it's nice to hear that it's kind of being used the other way as well. And so that feels more comfortable, doesn't it? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Chris, you wanted to jump in there. Sorry, I just wanted to say hi.
Yeah, no problem. I'm just looking through that question around that we were talking about earlier. And I think to Craig's point, you need all the stakeholders involved in terms of what do they need. And you'll probably get different stakeholders have slightly different needs and requirements. But I think what we also see once, even if that stage is done, is that sort of managers at a local level are sort of then removed from the process on implementation and the day-to-day operating of it thereafter. And then when you start looking at usage rates and adoption and engagement, if those managers aren't engaged, they're sort of bypassed, then you've got users and sort of central spending time making sure those managers are engaged thereafter and feel part of it, feel some ownership of it, and get some benefit from it, and helping them manage the staff, I think is something that's often overlooked as well. And that goes back to the I'm just trying to find the question around certain people aren't using it anymore. If it's the right solution with the right features, point one, and people have bought into that at the outset, it's then how do you keep that momentum going thereafter? And we kind of find that sort of my experience is managers are often overlooked on that part of the process.
Yeah, it's the culture of the organisation, isn't it, as much as anything else? Yeah. Sorry, Alicia.
I think that ties into another question that we've had around a which feedback system.
Yeah, I loved that question. So let me actually, I'm going to ask you another question first because it kind of links into this. So thinking about these questions that we would have to ask ourselves before we try and find which is the right device or which is the right solution for us to go to. There was a question around, if I provide technology to my staff, how do I know what the standards are and what I should be looking for as a minimum? Because that's all well and good, like Craig, you said, you know, you have your set of questions and your criteria and you don't deviate from it. But I could still end up buying the wrong thing if I don't know what the standards are, as it were, you know. And I think that technology is still one of those areas where people feel, I can't tell the difference. You know, you pick up, you know, without being rude, you know, an iPhone and I don't know, I'm trying to think of something else without being disrespectful, but another phone that's not an iPhone. And to all intents and purposes, they look exactly the same. So one costs a lot, one doesn't, but one does things that the other one can't. But how do I know? And what standards are there that these kind of lone worker devices apply to? So Alicia, I'll come back to you to that one just to start with, if I can, and maybe with your BSI hat on. I don't know whether that's something that you want to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. So the BS 8484 standard is the lone worker standard that we are certified against, and that goes, there's 3 elements to that. So the provider, their financials, and the device and the functionality within those devices. So that's the key part.
Right.
So alongside of that, there is a ARC standard, and there are a couple of standards. So there's the BS 5979 and the EN 50518.
Oh, really testing you now.
And basically, if all of those parts are met by the provider in terms of a response, if we have a verified alarm from an end user, it means we bypass the 999 process and we dial directly into the local control rooms.
Okay, so I'm going to say who does that, because you said ARCs, and most people will go, what, NOAA? I don't know what an ARC is.
The alarm receiving centre.
Right, okay, thank you.
So the people who deal with the alarms that come through, they will have URN numbers, so unique reference numbers, that will allow them to bypass the 999 process. And we're given a priority 1 response. Okay. Because we know who's using the device. Typically they've got GPS capability, so we know the location. They may have left a message telling us a little bit more about the task and the person that they may be seeing. So we build a picture, and obviously we've got the audio that's coming through from the device. So the operator will build the picture and they will pass that information over to the police.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I mean, you said there that we got the audio coming through the device. Craig, am I right in thinking that some of these systems now also have visual as well? So I'm kind of thinking about linking the lone worker devices in with body-worn cameras, etc. How is that working? And do you see that as a positive thing for businesses?
Yeah, you're definitely starting to see video come into these solutions as well. I think it's... I mean, so far, I'd say it's verticals like retail, security services, those, I guess, which are kind of peripheral or kind of run alongside sort of law enforcement type roles, where body-worn cameras are starting to become common.
Yeah.
But it is a much more, difficult's the wrong word, but it's a much more considered kind of approach that needs to be taken, because you now need to make sure you're on the right side of doing a data privacy impact assessment, and that your reasons for deployment are valid, and this isn't just about recording for recording's sake. So it's not that it's not difficult, but it does require a considered approach. And again, any credible vendor, Alicia has already sort of intimated, if they're BSIA members, that should mean that they come with a degree of credibility, and they check most of the boxes that they should check. And so you should get good advice from those people. But if not, or if you're just concerned about not getting the right advice directly from a vendor, then you should go and talk to an independent source, someone like you, Nicole, that can help sort of guide with those type of questions that they need to ask.
Yeah, and I do think that is a challenge. Like you say, it's everybody's out there selling their own devices, and we'll obviously talk about the positives of their own. I mean, it was interesting you were saying about, you know, there are lots of other things to think about when embedding things like body-worn videos, body-worn cameras. And I know certainly that we've got a couple of clients we've worked with where the piece of the jigsaw that's been missing is the training to the person wearing the camera. And I think that I would say that for all of the devices or apps or anything else that kind of sit out there as well. I think that's important. But then I would say that because I run a training company. But
you're quite right. And often the challenge there is just to deal with, you know, where staff turnover occurs. So again, it's more a prevalent problem in some sectors than others where there's a high turnover of staff, because that means you've now got to hopefully make sure that training that you're talking about there just forms part of a new employees onboarding process.
Yeah, no, most definitely. So you talked. Sorry, go on, Chris.
Just a further one on that one is what, again, from my experience on the body-worn cameras, when it comes to user training, actually the training around the kit is straightforward, but very simple. But it's more around embedding into standard operating procedures on when to do it and when not to do it. It's probably more important.
Yes.
And then again, going back to that manager, because who's going to have access to that video? What's your retention policies? What can you do with that video? So it's more complex through the chain of stakeholders. But you know, there's the DPIA at the outset, but those standard operating procedures, both for the managers accessing it and also for users at the front end, they're key in that as well.
Yeah, most definitely. So we've got a couple of other questions that have come in. Let me just flick over here so I can see what we've got. Okay, we've got an interesting one, which is just a very practical one about low signals. How can I protect my lone workers who work remotely in areas with poor signal and reception? How do you guys overcome that? And I think that's probably something that, you know, traditionally we've had kind of like agricultural, forestry, people like that, but actually you've got people going into other people's homes who work in the valleys in Wales or different parts of England where there's still not great signal, or into a block of flats that might actually block the signal. So how do you overcome those kind of issues? I don't know who wants to answer that one.
I'll have a crack first. I think now that we're all home working, a lot of us are home working as well. That's also, you know, brought a lot of new users to ask that particular question, because for whatever reason the coverage where they live isn't really great.
Yeah,
I think to answer the question sort of accurately, we need to know a little bit more about the specifics of the challenge. But I think that in short, there's a number of ways that you can solve this problem. If it is a user set that is kind of out in the woolly wilds type of thing in Wales or Scotland or deepest, darkest Yorkshire, then satellite-based systems rather than cellular-based systems is a commonly used way of solving that problem.
right.
Or if it's more perhaps the tower blocks that you're talking about, or kind of dead spots in cities and towns and what have you, or around people's homes, then the way to solve that might be by using, you know, geofencing, you know, which is just creating a virtual fence around a particular location where low coverage is known to be in play, and then just kind of, you know, alarm or note into the platform when someone enters into that geofenced area, and run a timer perhaps, so that if they're not now out of that geofenced area within, let's say, an hour or 2 hours or whatever is appropriate to the application, then, you know, let someone know about that. You know, I think you can automate it in that fashion.
Yeah, so just to give you a bit more information, they're actually community midwives in East Yorkshire. So I guess it's the going into people's homes situation where there's not great coverage.
Okay, so it sounds like maybe there's a mix of the two sort of situations there. You just got natural sort of coverage issues because it's rural areas, but then you're going into homes as well.
Yeah.
So I mean, satellites, it might be a combination of the two. That's probably what I'm getting at.
Okay, so I've got a question that's come in about apps. Now, Alicia, you talked about BS 8484 and the devices, etc. So are apps covered in that standard? How does that work?
Yeah, so again, it depends on the functionality available within the applications. So the main functionality is that you have to be able to override the lock of the handset. So to generate an alert through to the alarm receiving centre. So as long as the application has that capability, then yes, it would fall within the 8484 standard.
Right, okay, no, that's great, thank you. I mean, linking that into kind of behaviour and I think for me this is actually quite an important one. The behaviour of our lone workers and how they use the lone worker devices is massively important. And I know that sometimes people do leave them on the side, or they're, you know, I've been in training sessions where I've said to people, you know, have you got your lone worker devices, and somebody will get it out of a box where it was the day it was given to them. And so apps potentially for some people may be the way forward in terms of we use a mobile phone, we're used to carrying it already. But just linked into that, and you might not like this question, but thinking about that, do you think that there are any downsides of the lone worker devices and technical solutions in the way it changes people's behaviour in a negative way, lone workers in a negative way? Can you see any downsides to technology?
I think that's a really good question. In terms of changing the user's behavior, I'm not sure I've seen much evidence of that. I think there is a challenge to do with, you know, how tech savvy a user may be.
Yeah.
And therefore, their just natural desire or aptitudes to be able to embrace and just get into the habitual use of a technology solution. And then the other spectrum that people will sit on is their appreciation or awareness of risk. So I guess worst case scenario is you've got someone who's not at all tech savvy and sat at the end of the spectrum where they don't think they have risk. Those are the hardest people to get to a point of acknowledging that the solution their employer has given them is there to try and help them.
And actually that links back into you engaging with the right people in the first place, doesn't it? Which is about creating that awareness of the risk and why we're providing this. And I think that's really important.
And to that end, I think when you're running, if someone's running a pilot trial and assessing different systems and you involve users in that process, you should very deliberately pick users that sit at that non-tech savvy end of the spectrum, or those that don't think they have risk, or, you know, they're often perhaps seen as troublemakers in the office.
No, you're right, because I think if you allow people just to self-select for that, you're just going to get those people who, I want to play with a new toy, and actually I'm worried about it. So it's obviously going to come up with that kind of answer, isn't it? So you do need a real mixture. Chris, from your experience, have you seen kind of any downsides with this?
I think above and beyond what we've discussed, where I've seen it is where the device or the feature set is not applicable to that user application. In a real simple example where you have this sort of incapacity detection, where it's just not applicable to the role, and that can generate, you know, kind of pre-warnings that are going off. So the user interaction, they get frustrated with the device. If they leave it, it's going to generate alarms, which goes to managers to close down, or they're getting calls. And if it's just not applicable to that risk profile, that individual, then, you know, take that particular feature off. So I think going back to what we discussed earlier around making sure it's the right technology and solution fit for that user, for that group of users, which may differ from a team in another department. It's getting that bit right at the outset. But I suppose I caveat that with, you know, there's maybe no perfect solution for groups of users. You know, there's no magic wand to it. But it's no different to any other health and safety solution, right down to safety shoes that might be a bit heavy and clunky through to hard hats that maybe not fit so comfortably. You know, they have to be sort of paired, you know, or tempered a bit with that. But I think that's where I've seen it certainly cause frustrations when it's not spec'd up correctly.
I think that's probably one of the things that we've noticed as kind of that middleman, as it were, in this conversation, is that organisations like yours are much more able now to kind of tailor the offering to what the businesses need. And I think that has been a massive kind of advance in technology. For me, it's not necessarily the advance in kind of the technology that is available, it's the application of it. And that's been really great, I think, over the past few years. Yeah, definitely.
I think for that you can, we all have the capability of updating those functions and features over the air. So if you set out on a contract with a certain feature set and certain things aren't working, then you're not stuck with those. Those can be changed.
Is it a techie question? I'm going to come to Craig on this one if I can. Which kind of links into this, and I said it's about this idea of changing technology. It's about being concerned about the changing landscape and how the move to 4G and 5G and less an investment in 2G, 3G might affect any lone worker solutions that they deploy. How does your organisation and how does the industry as a whole kind of look at that going forward?
Yeah, good question, and I'll try and answer it in a non-techie way.
Please.
I think it's just, I mean, as a generalization, I'd just say it's something that, again, when you set out specifying the solution that you want to deploy for your staff, it's a topic to be aware of. And by the topic, I mean the fact that there is changing landscape to where the cellular, because we are principally talking about cellular technology here, which is the main technology that's used for most solutions, whether it be app-based or dedicated device-based. But there's a changing landscape there, and it differs country to country. As an overarching statement, all countries are moving away from 2 and 3Gs over to 4 and 5G, and then thereafter. But they're all following subtly different routes to their end game. So if you are an employer that have staff across multiple countries, for example, then that's a question you need to consider in each country. In the UK, it's very likely, and it's pretty much out there as common knowledge, that 3G will get sunsetted way quicker than 2G. Whereas if you go to the US, for example, or Australia, both 2G and 3G are now already sunsetted. So, yeah, you just have to be aware of that, because if you're investing in a solution and you're expecting that to work for you for, let's say, a 3-year period, you need to know, or you need to have a view today on what is likely to be in play in 3 years' time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah.
Still working for you.
Thank you. Alicia, I'm going to come to you with the last question, if that's okay. And it was kind of prompted by something that Craig said, but also by a comment that was made earlier on. At some point in the future, we will have people that will travel abroad again. So talk to me how this kind of, the standards we have in the UK work when you go abroad, and whether your systems, and when I say your, I don't just mean First Help, you mean the industry systems. How does that play when people go abroad? How does that play out?
So the systems themselves will still work. As long as you have the network coverage that you need for the devices or the apps to function, that will still work. The BS 8484 standard is not applicable overseas, but different organisations have different methods of responses. So it may be that we just escalate situations internally within organisations if we receive an activation, or some providers may have links with overseas emergency services that they can then escalate them to.
Right. But you wouldn't be able to use the URL and the unique reference number and be able to contact kind of emergency services immediately abroad?
No.
So that's something that businesses have to then think about and put into their plan and their procedures about, okay, Johnny's going off to Belgium or whatever, how are we going to deal with that in a different way than he's heading off to London? Yeah.
Absolutely. This comes back to your policies, procedures for different risk profiling.
Yeah. Thank you. And this is the conversation that, if I'm honest, we could have kind of just spent the whole afternoon talking about this, but it's just a really difficult one to kind of cram down into the time that we've got. But I know that when we've told people we will be finished by 4:30, that people will have other things that they need to do. So what I'm going to ask for us to do is, if anybody has got a question that they haven't had answered today, then please, again, feel free to either ping it in the Q&A box while it's still there, or if not, you can just email us at office@loneworkersafety, or in fact, no, send it to Louise. Send it to louise@loneworkersafetylive.com. She'll love that. And we'll make sure that it goes to the appropriate speaker or panelist this afternoon, and we'll make sure that we get those answered for you. But thank you, Chris, thank you, Craig and Alicia, for spending some time with us this afternoon, and thank you to all of our other speakers. I'm going to just hand back to Kristen so she can round off the session this afternoon, but thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. I would say, yes, you could have spent the whole 3 hours on this. However, despite that, I thought it was a really comprehensive discussion. I think for anybody considering how to either introduce lone worker systems or upgrade or change theirs, I think it was a lot of food for thought. So that was great. Thank you all. Thank you, panel. And I really have to say a huge, big thank you to all of our speakers today. I really, I think we did it. It was great. We had an opportunity. You offered your insights. It's been really interesting, thought-provoking, and a valuable afternoon, at least for me, and I hope for the people joining us today. Thank you, all you who participated by being there, listening, taking part. You've asked some great questions and provided some really interesting insights into what you're interested in. So I hope you have found it worthwhile. Thanks. And if you have enjoyed it today and you found it valuable, I just imagine how much you can get out of an actual conference. We're all in one place. So I hope you'll join us next year for the full day at Lord's Cricket Ground on the 12th of October, 2021. You can register online now, even set your diary way ahead. loneworkersafetylive.com, and don't forget to apply for your 10% discount off of whatever your delegate rate is. So we hope we'll see you in person next year. Hopefully you've enjoyed this. Oh, the doorbell is ringing, Nicole.
That's kind of perfect timing, isn't it? That's amazing.
You're having guest round.
Absolutely.
Well, okay. Finally, if you're unable, just I want to repeat, if you were unable to sit through all of it, you had to go walk your dog, whatever. If you want to hear it again, or if you have colleagues that you think would benefit from what was covered today, a link will be sent to you for the recording, which will be available on Lone Worker Safety Live's YouTube channel. You'll get it in the next few days. Do check it out and send it where you'd like others to see it. Thank you again, everyone. We really appreciate it. Hope you've enjoyed it. Be well. Stay safe.
Take care, everyone.
Take care. Bye.